Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. We pretty much just had a 24-hour loop going with the Irish Breakdown podcast, it feels like, which, hey, you know what? It's okay. I'm okay with that. But welcome, everybody. I'm Vince D'Addario. I'm the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. That guy right there is Brian Driscoll. He is the publisher at irishbreakdown.com, and I think the two of us are working on a combined about 4.5 to 5 hours of sleep. But you know what?
All right.
If Notre Dame has an open head coaching job, which they do, it happens about once every decade. And you know what? Let's put the work in, baby, because there's a lot going on, and it seems to change hourly. And I'm all in, man. I'm here for the party, and I'm enjoying it. And this is a very interesting time to be a Notre Dame fan and to follow this team.
Well, and I want to say something too, Vince, is listen, you all have to understand there's going to be a lot of rumors, a lot of stuff coming out. I would take a lot of it with a grain of salt and take a lot of it as, okay, this is part of the equation. I mean, look, how many times did we hear rumors about who USC's head coach was going to be, and it was never the guy they actually hired? You know, how many rumors did we hear about who the next LSU coach was going to be, and until the very end, it was never the guy they actually hired. This is the time of the year. Everybody's got sources. I have literally heard from different sources that it's going to be it's guaranteed that 3 different people are going to be the next head coach at Notre Dame, right? So you have to learn what sources you trust and what sources you don't trust. And some people just kind of whatever they hear, they throw out there. So we're going to try to give you the best sourcing that we have, the best intel we have during this show from our sources that we trust. I'll tell you what I'm hearing that I think is legitimate. I'll tell you what I'm hearing that I think is I'm a little bit more skeptical of.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we're just going to talk. A part of this is going to be us just talking and giving our opinion of everything because there's a lot to digest. And
yes, there is.
I have kind of had all these back and forth of thoughts and emotions and feelings. And I woke up this morning like, did that really happen? like really? Did that really happen? Like, did we really just do that last night? And then you listen to Brian Kelly's press conference today. I didn't listen to it. I read some of the transcript, and I
listened to it.
Yeah,
most of it.
I have some feelings on that as well.
So do I.
we'll get to all that
interesting
stuff.
Comments.
And of course, we're going to talk about where does Notre Dame go from here, and how does Jack Swarbrick need to handle this. We'll give feedback of Jack Swarbrick's press conference because there's a lot of takeaways from that press conference that people have that I don't think at all are what Jack Swarbrick was saying or doing. I've had people say, based on what Jack Swarbrick said, there's no way Marcus Freeman's the next head coach. And I'm like, that's not at all what I took from that, you know? So again, but I think it's just because all of our emotions are heightened, you know, everybody's feeling. And so we love it. I love that emotion, that passion. We're going to do the best we can to sort it all out. And that's what show's going to be about.
That's what we do, baby. That's what we do. So let's jump into do you want to talk about the press conference first or kind of where things stand?
Well, just do like the kind of the latest intel that we're hearing.
Okay. Let's do that.
So we'll talk about the latest we've heard about Brian Kelly, but look, here's what I've been told. Okay. So from my best sources, the vast majority of the sources I really trust have said it's probably going to be Freeman, but that there's really 3 candidates that Swarbrick is considering. It's Freeman, Luke Fickell, and Matt Campbell. Those are the 3 guys that I've been told that that Jack Swarbrick is at least considering. Part of me believes that that's getting out there because, look, Jack's a smart guy, right? I've doubted him before, and I looked pretty dumb for it, right? Thanks to Vince, right? Vince helped clear me up as to how dumb I was in that, which I appreciate. And I just when I was listening to his press conference, I was like, man, this is like vintage Jack, right? Like he just was being super coy and the poker face, and he was saying things that were setting up, you know, what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Not using a search firm, right? Like that tells me he has an idea of who he wants.
Right.
And so that tracks with what I've been told, and I'm hearing more and more and more and more that that's leaning towards Marcus Freeman. Now, I don't think that it's a done deal just yet,
right?
But that's what I'm hearing, that it's looking more and more like that. And I think that Matt Campbell going in 7-5 this year at Iowa State
that does not
should
help
make
him.
it a lot easier choice.
Yeah, I agree. To me, and again, it's not like Jack Swarbrick's on the other side of the door waiting for me to get done so we can have a chat. But like, I think the top two candidates, once called Cincinnati home, right? I think it's Freeman and Fickell. That's what it feels like to me. I think Campbell is a name that people really liked a year ago and beyond, right? If we're, like I remember going down to the Camping World Bowl, right? And I went down there for a previous employer, and I covered the press conferences, and I covered the game, and all that stuff, and may have taken my wife to Disney World afterwards. But everybody was, oh, you know what? We might be looking at the next Notre Dame head coach. Like it was then, like that the talk was already starting with him. But I just don't feel like he's done a great job with the situation that he was handed or that he's been cultivating at Iowa State. He had a lot of opportunities in a conference that's not great. I don't think anybody's going to say that the Big 12 is great. And there's a lot of parity in the Big 12. And Iowa State isn't a name that is being bantied about of the top, even the top three teams in that conference. So he had an opportunity to really sweeten the pot for himself, and he didn't. And I think that means something to me.
Yeah, and again, I'm not going to spend any time talking about Matt Campbell because I don't think Matt Campbell is going to be the guy.
And that's fair. And that's fair.
And I don't think that ultimately that's the top choice for Jack Swarbrick.
I hope it's
kind of how.
mean,
I've heard nothing that none of my sourcing has told me that Matt Campbell is a top coach,
right,
or the guy, or necessarily a threat to get the job over Marcus Freeman. I've simply been told that he's a guy that Jack is considering. And honestly, I know some people may not want to hear this, but I'm okay with that. Like, I don't think it should be a situation where Jack just says, hey, we're just going to go with this guy just because. I mean, I think you always need to think about, like, look, this is a huge hire. Yes. And I don't think you need to rush into it. And we'll state our case for why we think it should be Marcus Freeman later, but I think he's going to wait. Now, here's the thing is, what I don't know, so I've been told by a source today, and I've only heard this from one source, that there could be an announcement as soon as tomorrow. I have not heard that from anyone else, which makes me a little skeptical of it.
Sure.
But that is one thing that I was told, is that it could be as early as tomorrow.
If that's the case, I'll be sticking with the green background tomorrow.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
Just saying.
A little bit of case of the flu a little bit. So,
yeah. It is what it is. It is what it is. But hey, look, here, I want to touch on the point you made about this being a huge hire for Notre Dame, because what Jack Swarbrick did say is that the program itself is very healthy and it's in a very strong position, and he's right. And it's in a much better position than it was 12 years ago when he had his last search. And he's right. There's no question about it. Okay? No question. So this is very important because we've been talking about it before. They need somebody that's going to take Notre Dame to the next level, take them over the hump, which a lot of talking heads right now, I was listening on the radio on the way home today, they don't think Notre Dame can. It doesn't matter who's the head coach. They don't think that Notre Dame can even get above the hump, and that's why Brian Kelly left. That Notre Dame, the college football has passed Notre Dame by. It's all south of the Mason-Dixon line. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, that's the narrative that's out there right now. And I would love, obviously, for whoever the next guy is to make them look foolish. Like, that's my plan, right? That's what I would like to see. And I think that's why this hire is so important. And I have no problem with Jack Swarbrick taking a minute to take a step back and analyze the situation and then come to the conclusion that it's Marcus Freeman. Okay. I have no problem with that.
I'll address that more in a little bit. There's a couple other intel. No, because I think you're right. I mean, you've got to make the right hire. We said it last night. If it takes you 2 weeks to make the right hire, then it takes 2 weeks to make the right hire.
Right. Yeah.
I think he needs to go faster than that, which I'll address in a little bit. But I just wanted to touch on a couple other things real quick and related to just some of the things I'm being told.
Yeah.
So there's a report out there. I believe Pete Sampson put it out there that Brian Kelly has offered Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees to come with him. Brian Kelly is trying to take a lot of his Notre Dame coaches with him, which, That's fine.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what you do.
Yeah.
Now, recruiting is a little different. Well, we'll get into that later. I don't know what's going on there, but assistants, it would make sense. He wants to take guys with him, right?
Absolutely. Eases the transition.
I was also told by a source last night, someone who actually said that Brian Kelly was going to take the job before I thought he was going to take the job, also said that he's hearing that Tommy Rees is going to leave. There's other people that are telling me that. I talked to a really good source recently that said he's not sure that it's a done deal that Tommy is going to leave to go with him. I think the kind of the thought I had is that he at least wants to wait to see what happens with Marcus, right? Is kind of what I'm told. Now,
and that makes sense to me.
I don't know if that's true, but that's a good source told me that. So we'll see how that plays out. But again, the longer you wait, if you're Jack Swarbrick, the less opportunity you have to keep coaches that you want. Now, the two main ones I'm concerned about is Tommy, we've talked about last night, but the other one's Mike Elston. If you don't move quickly, you can end up losing Mike Elston to LSU and miss a chance to kind of have him remain on staff if you don't hustle up and make this decision. So I've kind of changed my tune a little bit to where, yes, you need to wait to make the right hire, but to me, the right hire is right there. And if that's the move, if you wait 2 weeks to hire Marcus Freeman, that's dumb, because you will have lost recruits, you will have lost players, and you will have lost coaches. If that's going to be your move, then make the move. And
yes.
So to me, the longer this drags out, the more chance there is that it's not going to be Marcus Freeman.
Well,
and that's
the third guy that I'm talking to, though, is Matt Bayless too. Like, those are the three guys that are really important to, if I'm going to be the head coach at Notre Dame.
The longer there's uncertainty, coaches are other staffs are trying to make hires right now, and they can't sit around. And what it tells me is if this goes into next week and we don't have resolution to this, it's going to tell me that it's not going to be Marcus Freeman.
Yeah.
And if he waits longer than a week or 2 weeks and he names Marcus Freeman the coach, that is a tactical error by Jack Swarbrick. Now, he would ultimately get the coaching hire correct by making Marcus Freeman the hire, which would be good, but you're going to hurt yourself because you're going to lose some people, players, coaches, recruits.
Yeah.
He had said today that the players won't have any say on who the coach should be, but characteristics. But look, you may say that, but the players are making it very well known on social media today who they want to be the next head coach. And you run and for me, when Jack talks about in just how strong the program is and how they want to continue that, if you don't hire Marcus Freeman, you're at the point now where you will not have the same program. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be worse or better, but it's just going to be different. You're going to lose players.
Yeah.
And you have to understand it. It's going to be a little bit of a start over a little bit. So it leads me to believe, based that combined with the fact he did not name an interim coach, and I'm trying to find his direct comment, but he said something about the interim coach during the press conference that made me wonder, like, okay, I didn't quite understand it. And I'm trying to
said the interim coach would not be considered as the head coach. And he doesn't look at an interim coach as a promotion. He looks as a place setter, basically, or a place holder, I should say.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
that was interesting to me that he said an interim.
Yeah. So this is what he said.
Not considered for the job.
This is what he said. Yeah, we haven't made a decision on an interim yet, and frankly, I think we may approach it a little bit differently. The staff is so well structured and the responsibilities are so well understood, I feel less of a need to have a designated interim. But as the search progresses, if we feel a need to put somebody in that position, they would not be a candidate for the job.
Yeah, interesting.
So what he's saying basically is, if this drags out and it's going to take a while, and they then have to name an interim, it means they're going outside the program.
Yes, that's correct.
That's what that means.
Yeah,
I don't think they need to have an interim right now because there's no game to play.
There's all that there is to do is for some figurehead. It could be Tommy Rees, it could be Marcus Freeman, it could be Mike Elston, to be interviewed Sunday night, when they decide who's going to the college football playoff. Like that's really the only thing that you need, right? And it could be Jack Swarbrick for that matter. Like, it doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, that's really the only thing that you need, because right now it's business as usual with your schedule, with workouts, with practice, whatever it is that you're doing, it's business as usual, right? And Brian Kelly has, we've watched him at practice. He is more of a figurehead at practice than he has been in the past. He's not actively coaching the quarterbacks and calling the plays. Like, he is kind of on the sideline talking to people and doing some different things. So you can still have business as usual without a quote unquote head coach.
Right. But I don't think they would do that if this was going. I think if this was gonna drag out for a while. So that's why I think he knows who he's gonna have. Look, here's how it's gonna work. Okay. If Jack ultimately decides that he wants to go with Luke Fickell, and I'm not saying that's what he's decided. If anything, I think he's going in the opposite direction. But if he ultimately just is too uncomfortable with Marcus Freeman not having experience that he decides to go with Luke Fickell's not going to be able to go through the whole playoff without deciding it, right? So Luke Fickell's going to have to decide after Sunday, okay, you're either taking this job. Now, you can coach Cincinnati through the playoff, but you're going to announce that you're our head coach, or we're going to go in a different direction. Right. And then that would be Marcus. So that's why I feel like we'll know it in a week. But I feel like if we go into the weekend and we don't have an answer yet, it tells me that he's waiting on Luke Fickell. That's not intel. That's my opinion. My opinion. Now, it's somewhat based on what I'm hearing, but it's me inferring and then kind of coming to my own conclusions about the timeline based on what I'm being told. So I want to make sure that I'm clear. I'm going to try to be as clear as possible today on what is I'm telling you that's what I'm hearing from sources and what is my opinion. And if I am unclear, Vince or people in the chat, please please ask, because I want to make sure that I'm not in any way saying something that's making it seem like it's sourced information when it's just my opinion, because I want to make sure I'm very clear on that. So,
and somebody made a really good point in the chat that I just want to bring up since we're talking about Luke Fickell, that, Cincinnati is going to the Big 12 here in a couple years. So staying at Cincinnati isn't necessarily not out of the realm of possibility, right? If Cincinnati wants to pony up the bucks for Luke Fickell, he'll stay, right? I mean, I just think that's an absolute possibility.
I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Luke Fickell would take the Notre Dame job. Right. I think it comes down to what Luke Fickell is hearing about whether or not the Ohio State job will come open anytime soon.
There you go.
And based on what Sean said last night, and I don't know the truth to that, but look, Chicago's going to be getting rid of their head coach most likely this offseason.
That's a fair statement.
And of course, Ryan Day is a guy that's been very popular in NFL circles. Now, is this the job
that their quarterback too?
Right. Now, I don't know if that means. I don't think that means anything. I think that would be more of a coincidence for him taking the job. It may be why Chicago likes him, right?
Yeah. Right.
But as far as him taking the job, it's not going to be because Justin Fields is their quarterback. It's going to be because he wants to go to the NFL. And again, I have no insight or knowledge. I'm just, with what Sean said last night. And Sean lives in Chicago, works in Chicago, is around professional athletes and former professional athletes all the time. So if he's saying that, then clearly it's something that's out there. It's not something he got off Twitter, right?
Right.
So I got to think if that's going on, that Luke Fickell has an idea. And that ultimately is there's two jobs that I've been told that Luke Fickell would take. And there's only one job Luke Fickell ever considered leaving Ohio State for as a non-head coach, and that was Notre Dame. He actually interviewed for the defensive coordinator job with Charlie Weiss back in the day.
Really?
Charlie Weiss wanted to hire Luke Fickell as his defensive coordinator, and Luke ended up staying at Ohio State because that's his heart. I mean, his heart's Ohio State. And that's ultimately, for me, my biggest fear with Luke Fickell is you bring him in, he's here for a couple of years, Ryan Day leaves, and he leaves to go to Ohio State.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That's and then Jack Swarbrick if Jack Swarbrick doesn't consider that, then he's not doing his job well. And we have learned a long time ago, Vince, that Jack Swarbrick's a really smart guy.
Yeah.
He has to know that. That's not going to get past him.
Yeah, I've been kind of refuting, blocking off shots about Swarbrick today. People texting me like, "Oh, he's an idiot," this, that, and the other. I'm like, I really don't see what's seeing. Well, there was no factual basis, I
get that. But like, why? Like, why?
Right.
Because he didn't name Marcus Freeman today. Did anyone actually think he was going to name Marcus Freeman today? Jack Swarbrick would never, ever name his head coach an hour after Brian Kelly had his press conference at LA. That's just not how Jack Swarbrick rolls.
Yeah,
that's just not how he is. Now, I would like him to do it, but that's just not how he rolls.
I would have loved, but I also understand what the situation is.
Like my man Rob Didoff, he's got it right here. He said Swarbrick is waiting too long in this. Folks, Hasn't even been 24 hours.
Right. Just relax.
It hasn't been 24 hours. Now, again, if we start getting later into the week and into the weekend, I'm going to be a little bit more concerned. But we're less than 20. And just because he hasn't announced it doesn't mean that he doesn't know what it is and that the people that do it know what it is. I do know. So what I was told by 2 sources today is that he told all the coaches to stay on the road. There's one coach that got called back. Do you know who that is?
I was waiting for you to
I'm
say
just
it.
letting it like I'm just letting it.
Oh, you're just letting it fester. Okay,
Yeah,
got you.
It was Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Why is Marcus Freeman being brought back?
Right.
So that's just kind of
let's just put it this way. They're not going to bring Marcus Freeman back so that he's sitting at home waiting for Brian Kelly's phone call.
Right.
Okay. That's not why they're bringing him off.
I will say this. If he does not hire Marcus Freeman, so like the whole thing about Kelly offered him whatever he wants to go to LSU. Look, we already know that he's not necessarily thrilled with the idea of going to LSU. Right. There's no way Marcus Freeman takes the job at LSU for Brian Kelly without knowing if he's going to be the next head coach or who the next head coach is going to be at Notre Dame. There's no way he does that.
Right.
So I'm just not worried about that. I'm more concerned about Tommy Rees leaving, but if Tommy Rees leaves, he leaves. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, Coach Rees has to make whatever's best. He also, hey, look, if I wait too long, because here's the risk that you run. And this is why I do think I've changed my tune a little bit. Yes, you have, however long it takes to make the right hire, make the right hire. If it is the right hire, right? Okay, so that's out there. But I do think he needs to do it as quickly as possible, because here's the risk you run. If you're Tommy Rees, you're sitting here saying, yes, I'd like to stay at Notre Dame, especially if Marcus is going to be the coach. Okay. Yeah. But, and I don't know if Tommy feels that way. I'm just telling you kind of based on some things I've heard, but I'm just trying to look at it from his perspective. Yes, I'd like to stay at Notre Dame. I'm a Chicago guy, right?
Yeah, right.
I like Marcus. I think that staying here is going to give me a much better opportunity to kind of build for my next, my next head coaching opportunity or an NFL opportunity. And then you go to LSU with Brian Kelly. Well, if you wait too long because you're waiting on Jack Swarbrick to make his move, and then you got to wait to see if Marcus is whatever the case is going to be, and then all of a sudden Brian Kelly can't wait forever to name his. Say, hey Tommy, look, I need to know, man. So Tommy either has to take the LSU job or he has to turn that down, with the risk of then Jack Swarbrick goes out and hires Luke Fickell, and Tommy Rees isn't staying as the OC, right? So now Tommy's screwed.
Right.
So that's why if you want to keep some of these coaches, and Mike Elson's in the same situation, if he stays around and waits thinking that maybe Mark's going to get the job, and then Brian Kelly's got to go make a hire, so that's another reason why if you want to keep these Matt Balis, Mike Elston, Mike Mickens, Lance Taylor, Tommy Rees, Matt Balis, all on staff, you need to, if you're going to keep this staff together, the decision has to be made quickly.
Yes.
In my opinion.
Absolutely. Because look, if you're an assistant coach, right, your number one priority as an assistant coach is to look out for yourself when your head coach leaves. Okay. So if that means listening to overtures of Brian Kelly at his new place, if that means starting to reach out to your contacts, throughout the coaching world to see what's open where, I mean, these guys are buzzing right now with what they're up to. Right. And at the same time, they're being asked by their current employer to continue recruiting and to continue to be on the road. That's a lot to ask of an assistant coach, but let me also say that's what they signed up for. Okay. Right. I mean, they understand it. I'm not, saying that it's outside of the realm of possibility or their scope of their responsibilities. But what I am saying is there's a lot going on as an assistant coach in college football when your head coach leaves. And so you're going to make the best decision for you. And again, time is of the essence. Because it's not like back in the day where all the coaching hires happened after the bowl games, right? That's just not how it is anymore. And Oklahoma is a prime example of the fact that assistants aren't necessarily staying past the bowl game either if they get a good opportunity to go with the guy that took, that left. And so, there's no guarantee that if LSU wants to make Tommy Rees their offensive coordinator and they say, hey, we want you here now, that he doesn't bolt. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but what I am saying is this is a new kind of a wave of college football. Things are changing all the time, and so there's no guarantees. And so I'm backing up the point of Brian in that time is of the essence here. And I am on board with that. A decision needs to be made in the next day or two. If that's the decision.
Even if it's not announced.
Right.
It doesn't look. He can wait till next week to announce it, as long as he tells people now that this is what's going on, and then Marcus start putting your staff together. Or hey, look, man, you need to find something else to do. But I do not see Marcus Freeman staying at Notre Dame as the defensive coordinator under anyone else. I don't care if it's Luke Fickell or Bill Belichick. I mean, and good Lord, Bill Belichick's not coming to Notre Dame. Okay, I just was trying to use the most extreme example possible. Before Brian, that was a bad idea to do right now. My bad. My bad, because I see the tweets and the texts and the people running to the troll message boards and they're like, oh my God, Driscoll, okay. No, I was making a point. He won't be the defensive coordinator. Marcus Freeman won't be the defensive coordinator Notre Dame next year unless he's still calling plays as the head coach, which I don't think he would do. Right. So, Vince, before we kind of dive more into the Jack Swarbrick press conference and takeaways, because I did want to specifically react to some of the things he said. Okay, let's get some super chats in.
Oh, yeah, let me scroll to the top and I'll just take them in order. How's that sound?
Let's do it.
All right, I love the fact that we get them all still. Okay, here's the first one.
Perfect timing for it.
I know, seriously. DSR 0468. Thanks for the super chat. John Harbaugh, if Marcus isn't named head coach, I think that is somebody that I would not be unhappy with, but I think it's also a stretch. For where we're at right now.
I have heard his name in the past as someone who was interested in Notre Dame.
Right.
I have not heard anything in this cycle about Notre Dame reaching out to him.
Yeah.
And I think they would have to go after him, even though he's expressed interest in the job in the past. They'd have to still go after him. And right now, I don't think that's the case. Now I'll say this: if we're 2 weeks from now, and they haven't named a head coach yet, then it tells me they're looking at Stoops and Harbaugh.
All possibilities.
Yeah.
Daniel Wade with the super chat. Thanks, Daniel. He says, I feel as if I'm in a mob. The last 16 hours with pitchforks headed to South Bend. This is nuts. Dude, if you'd have told me 24 hours ago that this is a conversation that we're having, I'd have been, no way. This is, all of a sudden, I text my wife this morning and, I kind of told her what the game plan was for today and everything. And she's like, what is happening? I go, you don't understand. I said, now this week just got chaotic. Like it just is what it is. And this is huge news, and you got to roll with it, man. You got to strike while the iron's hot.
Right. So. And, I just, there's been a lot of interesting reactions to Brian Kelly leaving. A lot of people feel betrayed.
Sure.
I wouldn't if I were you. I mean, look, this is who Brian Kelly's always been. I've said this for years. Brian Kelly cares about Brian Kelly first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna have some strong feelings on Brian Kelly, but I want to get through the super chats first. But no, I don't come with pitchforks. Look, you have to trust Jack Swarbrick to make the right. This is what I would encourage everyone to do.
Yes.
Sit back, take a deep breath, let Jack Swarbrick do what he's got to do. If he then makes what we believe to be the wrong hire, we will then step into the space and discuss it.
Yeah.
But just don't get too panicked. Just let it play out, right? I swear I wish I had those shirts ready to go right now.
I'm telling you.
Let it play out, and then we'll deal with it. But I would not, unless Daniel's trying to make a hint that, with pitchforks headed to South Bend, that he's advocating for Herm Edwards, leaving Arizona State to come to Notre Dame. You know what I'm saying? That could be his little reference. You know what I'm saying? But I'm saying it looks like a pitchfork.
No,
so
you're not wrong.
Yeah.
Peter Connolly, thanks for the super chat, man. Appreciate it. Matt
Trident. That's great. You corrected me with pitchfork and trident. That's so great.
Matt Baisley with the super chat. Thanks, Matt. He says, former player Mick Asoff tweet, per my sources, Marcus Freeman will be the next head coach at the University of Notre Dame. It's all
that was from last night.
Right.
Yeah. And we talked about that in the show last night.
Yeah. I mean, it's great, but it's not like Jack is calling up Mick and telling him what's up. And they haven't told anybody
more coming
anything.
From players.
They want him,
and
I get it.
Yeah.
And I will say, based on Twitter and what I've seen on Twitter and all that fun stuff, it feels like an organized situation with the players. They're using like the same, GIFs, the same pictures. Like it feels organized by them. But now, look, Jack Swarbrick also said, I'm not taking the players' opinions on individuals specifically, but and I think he used the word traits, but I can't remember exactly. But
that word's no longer used in my head.
That's fair. That's fair. But he said he's going to get the captains together and they're going to talk about what they're looking for in a head coach. So
Yeah, I mean, you can say that though, but at some point in time, the cry can be so loud,
exactly,
from the players that you have to be smart enough to say, if I don't do this, I'm gonna lose this team.
Anarchy. I mean, for lack of a better term, maybe that's hyperbolic, but it just feels that way to me right now. Alex Udell, thank you for the super chat, Alex. He says, Marcus Freeman just feels right to me. It says a lot when the players want a guy so bad. I think if Swarbrick passes Freeman up, it will prove to be a huge mistake. Go big or go home. Go Irish.
You know, I love what Alex just said. Can I read something from the article I wrote at irishbreakdown.com? I wrote an article today that said, for Notre Dame, there can only be one choice, and that's Marcus Freeman. Here's what I wrote at the end, and I think that this sums it up to me really well of what Alex just said. I said, champions aren't made by taking the easy route or being afraid to take a risk. Freeman is the bold move. He's the high upside hire. He's the risk you take knowing that if you end up being right, you made the move that brings a championship to Notre Dame. And here's the part that matters. In 5 years, you don't want to be the athletic director or board of trustee member who passed on Marcus Freeman.
Agreed.
And I think ultimately that's where it comes down to. And that's exactly what Alex is saying. I think Alex is spot on with that super chat.
Yep, completely agree. Patrick Connolly with the super chat. Whoever the next coach is, please go back to an era-style uniform with the white block numbers, gold pants, dark navy jerseys. No more mustard pants. One step at a time, Patrick.
All I care about is the pants. Like I'm good with the rest of the pants.
The jerseys are fine. I love the helmets too.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah.
So kudos to Brian Kelly for that one. Let's see here. Kevin Carter with the super chat. Thanks, Kevin. He says, with the reports of Kelly trying to poach Freeman now, I would agree with Brian and Sean and hire him as the next head coach and announce it the same time as Kelly, which, by the way, will be tomorrow. I don't think they've announced a time, or at least I haven't seen it.
For what?
But his introductory press conference is tomorrow.
Who for
Kelly?
Oh, I thought he was talking to, or is that just? So what did Kelly do today?
Nothing. He hasn't done anything today.
He said there's like a ton of quotes. I've read transcript quotes from Brian Kelly today.
There was a 1-minute video of him talking about winning championships that they posted on their website.
See, that's what I was saying. I didn't watch it. I was looking at the transcript of it, and
the press conference is tomorrow. From what I
Kelly
understand. So, all right.
Yep. That's interesting then. If the report that I was told is that it's tomorrow, then Jack is going to get petty and hire his guy the same day that Brian Kelly nagged, which I would be all for.
Oh, my goodness. I'm telling you, I'll be in the front row.
I'd be all for
Question.
that.
Woo-hoo-hoo.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, Lucas Chapman, thank you, Lucas. He says, was it just me or did Jack throw some backhanded shade on Kelly at the presser? Jack basically said Kelly didn't build the culture for this team. I don't remember that.
Now, I do feel that Jack threw some shade at Brian Kelly. I don't think that was it. I just thought that was Jack Swarbrick reiterating that the players are at the heart of this. And we lose a coach, we're not losing what makes Notre Dame unique.
And that's what I smart. That's what
he should have said that no matter. I don't think he took that as, because there were other comments he made where he did give Brian Kelly a lot of credit for what he's brought and the stability and how this is an attractive job. So I do think Jack threw some shade at Brian Kelly, but I don't think that was one of them. But you could tell Jack wasn't happy about this. There were some really interesting things from his press conference. And,
we'll get to them. Yeah, we'll definitely get to them.
Yeah. Sure. So, but I don't think that particular thing was one of those things. But if it was, good for Jack Swarbrick.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's okay.
Yep. Good for Jack Swarbrick.
Joseph Reyes, thank you for the super chat. Is today a make Bob Stoops say no day before announcing Freeman?
Well,
that's an interesting question.
That's an interesting take. That's what Jack did when he hired Brian Kelly. I mean, he offered the job to Bob Stoops first, Kirk Ferentz second, and told him, I need to know right now. And Bob, actually, what I was told at the time, and I've been told by multiple people since, Bob initially verbally agreed to take the job and then quickly backed out. Ferentz said, no thanks, but no thanks. And then he went to Kelly. But he did that quickly. I mean, quickly. It's like you got basically 24 hours to say yay or nay. And they said nay, and so he moved on to Brian Kelly. So he had a plan going into that. And here's the thing is, Jack said during the press conference that he was not surprised that Brian left.
Right.
And then Sean talked about last night about Malik Zaire heard on Saturday at Stanford that people thought he was going to leave.
Right.
So there's no way Jack doesn't have an idea of what he wants to do. That's why I don't buy his. And he's going to say all the things about it's going to take time. He's got to say all that. But
exactly.
To me, it could be just as easy as saying all that, just to then when you do hire Marcus Freeman, say, look, we looked at everybody, but
he's our guy.
How do you not go with this? We got a star in the making right here in front of us.
Right.
But you got to say all the right things. So that way it doesn't look like, because what you don't want to do, perception matters, especially in the United States of America in 2021. Perception is often more important than the actual reality. Let's be honest. I mean, do you follow politics? Do you follow entertainment? Do you follow culture? Do you follow professional sports? Right? Perception is often more important than reality. And so what you can't have a perception that you panicked.
Exactly. And Jack Swarbrick doesn't panic. I'm sorry. He doesn't.
Right. And so if you and me we're just going to promote Marcus Freeman, it's going to look like you rushed.
Yes.
Like you were caught off guard and you rushed.
Yep.
You make that hire, but the timing is important. Now, again, I don't think you wait a week to do that, but you give it some days to make it seem like you did your due diligence, because I think Jack has done his due diligence. There's no way anyone can tell me that someone that as accomplished as Jack Swarbrick and all he's done with the playoff, with the warding off the super conferences back in 11 and 12, with all the $1 billion
into a conference for 1 year.
Like that was all the things he's done. Yeah. He knew Brian Kelly wanted to leave, but wasn't prepared for when it was going to happen.
Yeah, that's a hard sell for me.
Not buying it.
That's a really hard sell for me too.
Yeah.
Let's see here. AST12321. Thank you for the super chat. Is it crazy for me to think that the risk of not hiring Freeman is higher than the risk that Freeman doesn't pan out as head coach?
I would say yes.
Yes is the answer to that question. Yes, because if he doesn't pan out and you give him 3-4 years or whatever the case may be, and let's say he doesn't pan out, the program's not going to be it's not going to be a dumpster fire when he leaves.
Right.
And so, but if you let him go and he becomes head coach someplace else and he's winning national titles or whatever, then you've made a huge mistake. So yes, I agree with that statement right there very much.
Yeah. Yep.
Next one from Hunter. Hunter, thank you. If Jack does decide on Fickell and he accepts, do you think Freeman would stay or come back here to be the head coach?
I appreciate that, Hunter. I think there's a greater chance that he would go back to Cincinnati as the head coach. So when he says here, just so for people who don't know, Hunter is a Cincinnati fan, which we appreciate you joining, Hunter. I think there's a greater chance he would leave to be the head coach of Cincinnati than he would stay at Notre Dame.
Yes, I agree.
As the DC. Now, I have been told last night that Marcus Freeman said I'm either going to be the head coach or at Notre Dame or the DC at LSU. Obviously, that comment makes sense because he's not anticipating Luke Fickell leaving Cincinnati, right? So, but if that domino fell, I think Cincinnati would look hard at Marcus Freeman as its next head coach.
I do too, and I
think you'd see the same push from the kids in Cincinnati that you are seeing from the kids at Notre Dame.
And we're going to talk about the specific people, like the potential hires later, right?
What's that?
Are we going to talk about the specific people later, or are we interjecting as we go? Because
I mean, you can interject as you go, but we're going to talk about those.
Okay, if we're going to talk about it, I'll save it. But okay.
Yeah.
Mike Nolan, thanks for the super chat. He says, "Get Freeman now, $5 million for 5 years." I think that's what that means. Low risk, high reward. Keep bulk staff, roster, recruits. Timing no good for Fickell unless they lose on Saturday. And I think that is a good point.
Yeah.
It's the timing for Cincinnati is terrible for Luke Fickell to leave.
I'll be honest. I think that we're going to know from Luke Fickell's end before Saturday. If we don't hear something from Luke Fickell about how he's not taking the Notre Dame job,
and I've seen them they're trying to get him an extension and all kinds of other things too. I think I've seen that on social media. Take that for what it's worth, obviously. But obviously if he signs an extension, it's game over. I mean,
or if he just comes out and says, "Hey, look, I love it where I'm at. I'm not taking the Notre Dame job."
Yeah.
I mean, I think we'll hear it. I think we'll hear, if we don't hear him do that before this game and we don't have a new head coach of Notre Dame, that's going to lead me to believe that if you want to talk about tea leaves and helping y'all understand tea leaves, if Luke Fickell continues to deny what he's going to do, and doesn't address the specifics of the Notre Dame opening,
right?
And Notre Dame hasn't announced a new head coach by the weekend.
Yeah.
I mean,
writing's on the wall.
So this is right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I just want to show something real quick.
Oh,
so my wife is working on our site got flooded with people today, which I'm super pumped about.
Yeah.
But we had never had that much traffic. So we've had to work on, kind of getting all that, taken care of, which I'm excited about. But she's also been working on some new designs. And so this is finally ready to go. It's going to get put on some stuff today, but this is going to be the new shirt design.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. So that's that one. And then that's it on the white shirt. So
I like that. Let it play out. That's great.
So very, very, very appropriate. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dale, I believe, has the next one. The source. Thank you, Dale, by the way. The source that I trust is Irish Breakdown. Fear the beard. We want Marcus.
That's what I'm talking about, Dale.
Coming in. I haven't shaved in like 2 days, but
yeah, you're Italian. You could grow a beard out real quick, real quick. Well, you're half Italian. What are you? Half Italian, half Puerto Rican, and half. What was the joke we had back in the day?
Yeah. There's Irish.
Vince and I were talking about his heritage once, and he starts naming like all these things that he is. And he was throwing out percentages, and I'm like, brother, you're way past 100%. I don't. So then the joke became 50% Irish, 50% Puerto Rican, and 50% Italian, something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what that meant. Sorry for that.
And my wife is nothing that I am, and so our kids are just absolute,
Your kids have like no Italian in them whatsoever.
None outside of their last name. They don't
look Italian at all.
No, they don't. Mike Perez, thank you for the super chat, Mike. He says, what's the rationale of Fickell not having his highest ceiling as Freeman? He's done amazing at Cincinnati. Imagine what he could do at Notre Dame. This is where I will give my thought, right? Again, this is Vince's opinion. And I don't even know if this is true. This is me thinking about the situation. Okay. So Cincinnati has done done a great job. Luke Fickell has done a great job at Cincinnati. There is no question about it. Right. And what I will say is, I will ask you, Brian, what is his strength? Or what is the strength of his team right now? Is it offense or is it defense?
It's both. I mean, they're a pretty balanced team, but I think defense is really what built their success.
And what I would say is that pretty much the entire defense was recruited by Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, and Mike Mickens.
And Mike Mickens, who are now on the Notre Dame staff.
Right.
Okay. And so my question mark about Luke Fickell is his ability to recruit. That's one of my questions about Luke Fickell.
At a truly dynamic level. Now, he was a good recruiter to Ohio State, right?
Sure.
But that's to a place that he had a deep passion for. My issue with Luke Fickell is this. I think Luke Fickell would do a good job at Notre Dame. It's just, I don't think he's a dynamic guy. And I look at the hires he's made at Cincinnati. He made a great hire by hiring Marcus Freeman, right? But that was an easy one because he coached Marcus. They coached together. He coached Marcus as a player.
Or something like that.
I don't know about
he was roommates with Mickens.
Yes.
And
Marcus played for Luke. Luke Fickell was Marcus's position coach.
Right.
And then, of course, they coached together. And there was obviously that was an easy hire. His other hires since then have been good hires. I mean, good coaches, Mike Denbrock, Dick Tressel. I mean, good hires.
Sure.
But not dynamic hires. And that would be my question is, would he kind of basically be what Brian Kelly has been differently, because but sort of the similar ceiling. He's done a nice job this year. Right. But
no question.
I just feel like some guys are a fit for certain places. And not others. And that's really my big concern. But also, too, Mike, what it boils down to is I'm very concerned that if he took this job at any point in time, if Ohio State comes open, he would leave for Ohio State. That's just something you have to consider.
Yeah.
But he asked about specific – that has nothing to do with the ceiling. I just don't know if he is dynamic enough. Because, like, I look at their offense, for example, and their offense at Cincinnati scoring 40 points a game. But if you actually break down the film – they're scoring 40 points a game because they are just better than everybody they play. Like they just have way better players than everybody they play.
Sound familiar?
Yeah. There's a reason they only scored 24 against Notre Dame, and 10 of those came off of
boneheaded offensive mistakes by Notre Dame.
Special teams and defensive forcing mistakes. He scored 21 against Georgia last year, with Georgia not having a lot of their guys on defense. They scored 38 against Indiana, but it was they were aided by other things, not because of their offense. I just don't view their offense as a really dynamic offense. I mean, even if you look at like when they played Tulsa last year, right? And Tulsa was obviously a really good football team last year. But, Cincinnati won those games, but they were competitive, lower scoring-ish games, right? You played Tulsa in the title game, you beat them 27-24. That's great. You scored 24 points against Army. Whenever they've been kind of challenged by a really good defense, they're a good offense that can get it done. They beat UCLA in 28-19. They scored 24 points. Right. They beat UCF that year, scored 27 points. That was more of a defensive win. They lost twice to Memphis, scored 24 points in both games. So whenever they've played really good teams, they just don't score a ton. And to me, that's always going to be my concern about Notre Dame is they're going to play great defense under Luke Fickell. They're going to be tough. They're going to be physical, like any team, not Notre Dame. That wasn't a Freudian slip.
Right.
That was just me making a point. If he came, they'd be tough under him. They'd be well coached. They'd be disciplined. He would recruit better than Brian Kelly, but would he have a dynamic enough offense to go out and play for championships? No, I just don't see that. I think he would have a higher floor than Brian Kelly, or a higher ceiling than Brian Kelly, because I think his teams would show. Here's the other thing. You will never have to worry about Notre Dame not showing up at Miami on a November Saturday night.
Dynamic is the word.
But would they be dynamic enough to win that game? That's the different question.
Right.
But they would not. You won't see the 41-8s. You won't see the 45-14 at Michigan's if that were to happen. But that doesn't mean they would win those games.
Right. I agree.
But more so, would they? They would lose to Clemson maybe 24-10 instead of 30-3. The 31-17 against, or 34-17 lost Alabama would be a legitimate 34-17 loss, not like, or 31-14 loss, not a Notre Dame scores late. You know what I'm saying? Like,
no, I know exactly,
but they would still lose those games. Whereas with a more dynamic coach who's going to recruit even more dynamic players and hopefully hires a more dynamic offensive coordinator. And again, that's the unknown with Marcus Freeman, which I say the floor is lower.
Right.
But that's where I'm coming from. No, Mike, that's a great question, Mike. That's a very fair question.
It's a very fair question. Here's what I would suggest. When we sign off here, whenever that is today, I would suggest go over to YouTube in the little chat, in the little search bar, type in Marcus Freeman Irish Breakdown and rewatch Brian's interview with Marcus Freeman. It's a half hour-ish once they actually start talking. And just remind yourself of who Marcus Freeman is, because we haven't had an opportunity to talk to him since the season started. Okay. So that's what I would suggest for everybody to do. I did that earlier today, and I came away just as fired up as I did that day today. So that's my suggestion to everybody.
The other thing too is think about, why are the players so full-throatedly both sides of the ball? It's not just defensive players,
and it's organized.
I'm telling you, why they have not known him very long.
Right.
Why?
And
why
former players are on this bandwagon, and they didn't play for him.
Never played for him.
Never played for him.
Because you can just tell, and look, this is part of the reason that I wrote the article last week about I wrote an article last week saying Notre Dame needs to do whatever it takes to keep Marcus Freeman. I did not anticipate this coming, right?
No.
I mean, again, we joked last night. I said during the summer that I won't be shocked if Brian Kelly left after the season. I mean, we talked about that.
Sure.
I just didn't see it. I thought he would retire. I didn't think it was going to be like this.
Go to someplace else.
Right.
Right.
So I was not prepared for this, but it was evident last week that teams are going to come after Marcus Freeman, and you have to do what you got to take to him. And part of it was because, I got the idea, but I was like, well, let me talk to some people around the program. And it was just like, you just see it.
Yeah.
Like, this guy's a star.
Yes.
Like in the past, when there have been assistant coaches that people have pushed to be the next head coach, it's always been a media driven thing. Mm-hmm. Whether it was Mike Sanford, then it was Mike Elko, then it was Chip Long, then it was Clark Lee. It's always been the media and people on like fan boards, right? Message boards. I still remember the previous place I worked at. There were literally people that were like, I think Mike Sanford might be the next head coach in Notre Dame, and just kind of chuckle and laugh and like, you're an idiot, Mm-hmm. Sorry, I disdain for that place. But that was never player driven. right? There were a lot of players that weren't necessarily fired, that respected Clark Lee, but didn't necessarily say, hey, he should be our head coach. You don't see those players there were guys that played for Clark Lee for 3 years that aren't saying, hey, bring back Clark Lee. No, you're not saying that. That's our guy.
Right.
Because there's a level of he's smart, he's intelligent, all those kind of things, but there's also a level of this guy has my back. I trust him. And that's a big
sense
part
of accountability there too.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge. And you've talked about that. You've given those stories already this season about how he's accountable for what he does. And players respect that.
I can't tell you how much players respect the fact that when a mistake is made, a coach owns it in front of the whole group.
Exactly.
That is not a thing that happens often. But that's what the great ones do, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And the players see that. And the other thing too is that they've played under a guy as a head coach who's the exact opposite of that.
Right. Yep. Could not agree more with that.
So
okay, moving right along. Andrew has a super chat. Swarbrick, thank you, Andrew, by the way. Swarbrick acting like this is a normal search with secret flights. Freeman is loved by the fans, players, and recruits and is a proven winner. Fickell, great, but Freeman is the ND guy now, and that counts.
I agree. I don't think it's necessarily a given that Swarbrick doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
Look, remember we said last night about Brian Kelly leaving? There's a right and a wrong way to do this, right?
Yes.
There's a right way and a wrong way to leave. I think Brian Kelly did it the wrong way. I don't think that him leaving is a bad thing. Look, no one that knows me thinks at all that I'm upset that Brian Kelly left. I'm not. Okay? There's just a right and a wrong way to do it.
Exactly.
I was talking to a former Notre Dame player today who was pissed about it. And I said, look, man, you played for him. Are you at all surprised that he did this way? It's like, no, not at all. Still pissed because he loves Notre Dame, because he knows what the players are going through.
Sure, absolutely.
And this is a guy that's now in the National Football League, so it's not like some transfer guy that is unhappy.
Somebody
this is a guy that graduated and got drafted and is playing the National Football League. And so it's not surprised. But
everybody's saying, go ahead.
The point is, there's a right and a wrong way for Jack to do this.
Right.
I don't know if he's going to do it the right or the wrong way, but I don't think necessarily naming Marcus Freeman as the head coach today is the right way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's give it a couple days. Give it a couple days and see how it plays out. Okay.
Yep.
Just give it a couple days. All right.
Absolutely.
And then if Freeman leaves, if Marcus Freeman leaves to go somewhere else, then we know Jack Swarbrick told him he's not getting a job.
Right.
And then we can address it at that time. But let's just look.
And we will.
I want you to do what I did not do when the whole expansion playoff thing came out, which is just give Jack the initial benefit of the doubt and really take a calm approach. I didn't do that. I reacted emotionally, and Vince was like, you may want to think this through a little bit, right? And the point is, I'm being serious. Just give it a 48 to 72 hours to see what happens. Okay? Because like I said, there's a right and a wrong way to do it. And I think I would be, if I was him, would be on the let me do it after Brian Kelly's press conference, because then what happens? Brian Kelly has his press conference, let's say at 1 o'clock tomorrow. I don't know what time it's going to be, and then give him that little bit of oxygen, and then 5 o'clock I'm coming in with my press conference,
right?
And all that oxygen is gone, and it's all about Marcus Freeman, right? Let's be honest, that's what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
And so now I'm not saying Jack's going to do that, but that's kind of part of that. Just let's give it a couple days.
Okay? Absolutely. Yeah. No question.
And then we can react to it at that point in time.
All right. Felix Fournier has a super chat here all the way from above the border. He says, I respect Kelly's accomplishments at Notre Dame, but I'm having a hard time respecting the person leaving for LSU after all he said. Oh, the hypocrisy. All right, let's see here. We get it. I get it, Felix. Yeah, go ahead, bud.
I don't think what Brian Kelly did was hypocritical.
I just think it was him. I mean, it was just
that's just who he is.
Yeah, just exactly.
I mean, Brian Kelly is, even when he said a week ago when he turned down the USC job, because look, here's what we found out since this. He was interested in the USC job. I've been told by multiple sources he reached out to Florida. He wanted that job. Florida wasn't interested.
Yeah.
And if clearly LSU. Brian Kelly wanted to leave.
Right.
And he never said anything during this. And when he was asked about USC, he never said, and this is something I express, he never said, I'm not going anywhere. He said, like, look, I got a great job, but then he went on to say, if somebody wants to offer me, blah, 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 then I may have to talk to the wife about it. Right. Well, what did he say in his little thing today? Right. For me and my family, this is the thing. What did he say to the players? Right. Told the players, look, this is just an opportunity for me and my family. Right. And so it was always kind of there. I don't think it's hypocritical. I just think it backs up everything I've ever said about Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly was always out for Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly never had this deep passion for Notre Dame. And I'm going to tell you something right now. When I saw the final numbers of his contract, 10 years, $95 million, that's not that big of a pay raise. The fact that he did not give Jack Swarbrick an opportunity to counter, to keep him here, tells me he just wanted to leave. And he convinced himself. Brian Kelly projected onto Notre Dame his own failings. The fact that he thinks he's taken Notre Dame as far as it will go.
Yep.
Not as far as he can take it, but as far as it will go.
I agree.
Tells me that he blames Notre Dame for the failures of the program, not himself. Failures of the program. Failures of the program to take that final step. The program has not been a failure. Brian Kelly did a great job getting it to this point, but he blames Notre Dame for it not being that next step, not himself.
Right.
And that speaks volumes. And the fact that there's rumors that he's going to take Jeff Quinn with him speaks absolute volumes about Brian Kelly's unwillingness to admit that he was the final stumbling block. And he wants to blame it on Notre Dame. The fact that he didn't counter and he wanted out, you're in the midst of an 11-1 season and you want out, why? Because one reporter is not buying your spin?
Yeah.
No, that's not why. He thought the program had gone as far as it'll go. And I just think he wanted a new challenge and he wanted to win a title. And he didn't think Notre Dame was going to allow him to do that. And I don't buy that. I think that's a cop out. And it's what I've said all along. Brian Kelly is unwilling to look in the mirror and say, you know what, I screwed up on that one, until he has no choice but to. And I've said this time and time again, whenever Brian Kelly has made big decisions, it's because someone left or because there was failure.
Or somebody forced him to.
Right.
Right.
And this is going to end up being a blessing for Notre Dame if Jack Swarbrick makes the right hire.
Bingo.
And I'll tell you this right now, I would still rather have Luke Fickell for the next 5 years than Brian Kelly.
I would too.
My ultimate choice is Marcus Freeman.
Yes.
But I would much rather have Luke Fickell moving forward than Brian Kelly.
B Place in the house. Thank you, B Place. Say Freeman has announced the head coach. Tommy Rees leaves. What offensive coordinators would we drop big money to get? Ryan Day leaving Ohio State. Kevin Wilson. Jeff Brom consider Notre Dame. Brom's not stepping down to be from a head coaching job to be a coordinator.
Right.
Can we all agree on that?
Perhaps he met Brian Brom. Perhaps. Who is his brother? I'm just saying, like, perhaps.
Yeah, okay.
Kevin Wilson is not an option, right? And obviously, yeah, that's not going to happen. Honestly, I'd have to really think about it. The only name that keeps popping up in my head is the one I said last night, and that's Phil Longo, right? And
there's a name that
Jeff Lebby, who's at Ole Miss. I don't know enough about Jeff Lebby to have an opinion on that. John likes him, and I trust John. Because John looks at it from a recruiting standpoint.
Right.
I love Ole Miss's offense. Now, it's faded a little bit in November, but they also don't have the depth to deal with some of the injuries that they've had to deal with.
Right.
And I do think Lane Kiffin is a great mind, but I always kind of get nervous about hiring a guy who's the coordinator for a head coach who's the play caller. That's a little bit of my issue. But Lane Kiffin is also more of a coordinator, more of a play caller like Brian Kelly was during his tenure, where it is actually Jeff Lebby and that staff that are putting the play game plans together. That's what I've been told. And then Lane mainly kind of tweaks it to what he likes and then calls the plays. So I'm a little nervous about that, but that's just my initial reaction. I'm going to do a lot more digging into Jeff Lebby at Ole Miss. But there's some others. Warren Ruggiero at Wake Forest is not a guy that I don't know if I would love that. I don't think Warren's I've known Warren a long time, just, in passing. We've worked camps together. He was coaching in Virginia when I was still coaching. He was with Dave Clawson at Richmond, so we've crossed paths. He was at Bowling Green when I would go work their camps and do different things when I was at Defiant. So, I mean, I know him and like professionally know him. And I like him. He's a really smart. You'd love him, Vince. He's a little nerdy, older nerdy guy. that's just like, let's just get in the film and talk ball and that kind of guy, right? Like he's just that kind of guy.
Yeah.
I just don't know if he'd be that dynamic recruiter / coach that Notre Dame would need. So I'm going to think about some names and put some together. But the first one that pops in my head is Phil Longo.
Fair enough.
I mean, because again, look at what North Carolina did this year, right? I mean, like, think about this. For all the excuses that Brian Kelly makes about, oh, we lost this and we lost that, and that's why we can only score 34 points a game, right? I mean, you look at North Carolina, they scored 36 points per game this year, including scoring 34 on Notre Dame's defense during a stretch when in the games before that, if you think about the games before that game and the games after that game, Notre Dame was pretty flipping dominant, yet they moved the ball on Notre Dame. Right. And if you look at a lot of the games they lost, even to NC State, I mean, the offense did what it needed to do. They flipping got them a 30-20 lead with 2 minutes left in the game. Right. That game wasn't on the offense. They lost because they had a defense that gave up 31.6 points per game. This year, North Carolina averaged 479.9 yards per game. And they averaged 6.8 yards per play. Now, obviously, that's down from last year. That's still really good. And they did that after losing 2,000-yard running backs, both of which were drafted much higher than anyone Notre Dame had, including Javonte Williams, who was a second-round draft pick and had a pretty good year for the Broncos this year. And De'Ami Brown was a third-round draft pick as a 1,000-yard receiver. And they lost Daz Newsome. And they still went out this year and scored 36-plus points a game and almost averaged just under 500 yards per game. They were 10th in the nation in yards per game this year. And they were 6th in the nation in yards per play, despite losing 2,000 yards. And Notre Dame's crying about losing Ben Skoranek and Javon McKinley and their blocking tight end. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that guy's done a great job, and he did a great job at previous places he's been. I got to do some more research on him as well, character-wise, recruiting-wise. Those are things I got to find out. But he's the first name that pops in my head in regards to just as a play designer and play caller. And the thing I love about North Carolina is, yes, he throws the ball a ton, but he runs the ball. You know what I mean? Like, for everybody talks about, like, oh, Sam Howell and all the pass game, and they do throw the ball a lot, but they're a running team. I mean, they need to run the ball. They want to run the ball. And that's what I love about it.
Unmute. Here we go. Jay Clampett Investments says, just hire Freeman. Thank you, Jay Clampett, obviously, by the way, for the super chat. Very much appreciated. He says, just hire Freeman, young, energetic, bulldog recruiter. It would be excitement. I just feel like all other hires would be meh. And I think he's right. And again, let's say you hire Marcus Freeman and it goes south, okay? And he doesn't end up being the guy that we all think that he is. He's still going to recruit really, really well. And the coffers will be stocked with dudes.
Yeah, okay? I don't think you can hire a guy just because he's a great recruiter. And I said that in my – no, I know you're not saying that. Okay. I said this in my article, that you can't hire a guy just because he's charismatic and a great recruiter. You can't. You have to hire a guy because he's got all the other intangibles as well. Because Charlie Weiss was a great recruiter, right? I mean, wasn't he?
Yeah, no, he was an excellent
great recruiter, right?
No question about it.
At the end of the day, you have to hire a guy that he's got all the other characteristics and attributes needed to be a great head coach. And that's why I want Marcus Freeman as the next head coach. It's those things. It's the intelligence, the teaching, the ability to relate, the accountability, the fact that he will set a new standard. He came here and did not accept all the stereotypes about Notre Dame and all the excuses that Brian Kelly has built at Notre Dame. He said, forget all that noise. I'm going out and getting the best players.
Yep.
And it's all those things. It's not that he did that as a recruiter. It's the mindset that was behind that decision that I don't care about. I'll battle Bama. I'll battle Clemson. I'll battle USC. I'll battle whoever I need to battle to get the best players.
Yep.
That mindset is more important to me than just that he's a good recruiter. It's those things. Now, is the fact that he's a young, energetic bulldog recruiter a part of it? Absolutely.
Yup.
But it can't be the driving force. To me, that's a byproduct of all the great things that I think would make him a successful coach.
Exactly. Daniel Wade with the next one. Thanks, Daniel. He says, Brian, do you ever get into an emotional headspace? I want to be more like you, calm, logical, and yet something like this happens and I'm off and running.
So I don't even know what an emotional headspace means. what I do know is that's what's great about having Vince and Sean and my dad and some other friends, because we can just kind of go off on the phone and I can get all my yelling and screaming and cussing out of the way then. And then when we get to the show, it's about trying to be calm and logical. But no, I mean, I think that's just the nature of being a football coach is you have to be able to project calm even on the inside when you're just like, it's like you have to be able to do that. And I guess that's just kind of where I'm where I'm at with that one.
Tara Trixie says, thank you, Tara, by the way, for the super chat. Scenario: no interim coach named. Notre Dame makes the college football playoff. Galvanized team wins the national championship without a head coach. So what does the statue look like?
It looks like 6'1.5", 235-pound former linebacker at Ohio State is what it looks like. That's what I think it looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no way in heck that Notre. And I've said in the past that if Brian Kelly walked away and his replacement won a championship, that Brian Kelly should, I said joking, get a statue, but get a lot of the credit. I think the way he left this time would negate that. Because when I said that, I was more of like you retire and your replacement comes in, but leaving your team when you're trying to get to another chance to win a title, he bailed on you before you had a chance to compete for that title. He clearly wanted out during the season, which to me adds even more. It makes so much more sense now that he just turned the offense over to Tommy and let Marcus do what he wanted to do.
Right.
And explains so much more his goofiness at so many of the press conferences, his jokes. And it's like, he just didn't care. Like, I'm not going to be here anymore anyway, so I don't screw you guys. It's like, imagine if you would have just kind of had that relaxed demeanor all the time, let your coaches coach all the time. And maybe what could have been.
DeBeezy jumping in. Thanks for the super chat. It says it's telling that Kelly is not targeting Quinn. Or at least we're not hearing it.
That's not true. I've heard that he's planning on taking Quinn with him. Yeah. No, we'll see. We'll see. But I was told that he is taking Quinn with him. So
that'd be a shame.
I don't think that's accurate.
Jim with the super chat. Thanks, Jim. Says, is the skill set for a head coach different from a DC? And if Freeman becomes head coach, will this take away from his ability to be a recruiter?
Yeah. I mean, look, what the traits that go into being, oh my God, I said it.
You did. You said the T word.
I said it. The characteristics and attributes that go into being a great coordinator do not necessarily translate to being a great head coach. For example, I think Brent Venables is a very good defensive coordinator. I would not hire Brent Venables as my head coach if I was anywhere. I just would not do it.
I've heard his name linked to Oklahoma.
Well, he was there at Oklahoma for a long time.
Yeah.
He was their D coordinator under Bob Stoops for a while. But he also got let go because their defenses started to falter.
Mm-hmm.
I personally, but it's not even about that. It's just his personality. There's just things that I just say, you know what? I don't see it. There's just certain coaches where they've got the attributes to be a great coach, but they don't translate to a head coach. And then there's other guys who've never been a head coordinator or never been a coordinator that you just see something like Urban Meyer was never a coordinator, but anyone that ever was around Notre Dame was like, that guy's going to be a great head coach someday.
Right.
Just because he had the other attributes, the intelligence, the teaching ability, the ability to manipulate. And I mean that in a positive manner. Look, part of being a great head coach is the manipulation of the psyche. Lou Holtz was a great manipulator. And I mean that in the best possible sense.
That's one of his best attributes, I would say.
Right. And that's being able to go into the locker room and do the save Jimmy Johnson. That is manipulation. That is emotional manipulation. And that's part of being a great football coach. It's not doing it in a deceitful way. It's about knowing how to get your players mentally, emotionally, and physically prepared. And sometimes that requires you to play game. Look, and so I've learned this as a coach, and I've seen it firsthand. I've done it myself. There's just days you decide, you know what, today I'm going to be all over these dudes because they just need a kick in the pants, right? And other days you're like, man, this has been an emotional week, or I've been hard on these kids, and today they just need a lot of encouragement, right?
Yeah.
Now on the inside, you're like, you mother. You know what I mean? Like, but you just decided that, look, they don't need that today. I've been doing that to them for 3 days now. They need pats on the butts. They need to know that the work they're putting in is going to reward them. That's all part of being a great coach. And as a head coach, you've got to do that to such a different degree.
Yeah.
Because it's about your staff. It's about the media. It's about the fan base. It's about your play. I mean, it's about all of it. And some guys just don't. And now, will it take away from his ability as a recruiter? No. If anything, it's kind of like, I put it to you like this, right? Like if you're like the Secretary of State, United States, right, and you're negotiating certain deals, they say, well, you're just Secretary of State, right? Like, hey, that's a pretty cool deal, but you're the Secretary of State. Then you get elected president, and it's like, I got a little bit more of a big stick to wield now, right?
Yeah, sure.
And that's kind of the thing about being promoted to head coach. If anything, it makes him an even better recruiter.
Well, look,
you're literally coming to play for him.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's not leaving.
See, here's the key. Here's the parallel that I will use, right? So Brian Kelly announces he's leaving to go to LSU. You don't see a mass exodus of recruits decommitting from Notre Dame and saying, we're going to LSU with
like
Coach
we
Kelly.
saw at Oklahoma.
That took the words right out of my mouth.
Sorry.
When Lincoln Riley decided to go to USC, instant decommitments, instant committed to go to USC, because they were recruited by Lincoln Riley.
To play for Lincoln Riley.
To play for Lincoln
Riley.
Not
to go to Oklahoma.
Correct.
To play for Lincoln Riley.
Right. And he was a dogged recruiter. Like, he was a good recruiter, okay? Now, I'm not saying that Marcus Freeman's going to go out there and get guys to play for him specifically and not the University of Notre Dame, but he will be a dogged recruiter, and he will get guys to come to Notre Dame for the right reasons, okay?
Yeah.
I just feel like
to your point, though, when Lincoln Riley left to go to USC, the classes fell apart.
Completely.
When Brian Kelly left to go to LSU, all the Notre Dame players started saying, I want to play for that guy.
Yeah.
All the Notre Dame commits started saying, I want to play for that guy.
Yes.
Including offensive commits.
Yes.
Eli Raridan, a tight end, was in that thing last night, and I'm told he was talking about Marcus Freeman staying in class.
Right.
And so that's the other thing about Marcus Freeman. He's just kind of got that thing where when he walks in a room, you're like, okay, Coach Freeman's here. All right, let me sit up straight. Let me be prepared. Right. He just has that kind of energy.
He just commands that attention, right. And he just has that it factor when he walks into a room. You're 100% correct. Jacob Watson has the next one. Thanks, Jacob. Really appreciate it. Says, if Freeman is coach, do you think Reese stays and is allowed to let his imagination loose? Would it get us recruits we might not have gotten? For me, if Tommy Reese stays as the offensive coordinator and Marcus Freeman is the head coach, I am so excited to see what the offense will look like under Tommy Reese without Big Brother looking over his shoulder. That's what I'll say. Will it be a huge success? I don't know, but I would love to see the opportunity. I really would.
I would too. And I think that would be part of Marcus Freeman's task, is saying, hey, Tommy, look, here's the expectation, man. Yeah. The expectation is that we are a dynamic offense. Now, I don't want to do it in a super up-tempo, run 95 plays kind of thing, because I think that puts a lot of stress on your defense.
On the defense, absolutely.
But we're going to be an explosive, again, like what Tommy said, aggressive and explosive and efficient, right? Aggressive and efficient. That's a great way to explain it. And that's why I love that interview so much with Tommy Reese this summer that we had with him. It's the combination of explosiveness and efficiency is what I've been praying and calling for years, right?
Right.
And we've never seen it. We've seen Notre Dame be explosive 15 and 17. We've seen Notre Dame be efficient at 18 and 20. We've never seen them be explosive and efficient.
Right.
And that's what this offense has become late in the year. Now, again, we don't know if they're going to be able to do that against good teams. We need to see that still. But I think there's optimism there. And that's why I would like to see that. But if Tommy Reese decides he wants to go with Brian Kelly, I understand that. And I think there's options out there to get that done. But yeah, I'd like to see it. I'd love to see Notre Dame with a young head coach that's energetic and a dogged recruiter. I'd love to see him with a young offensive coordinator that's a dogged recruiter. And if it's going to be interesting. Let's just leave it at that, right? It's
absolutely
going to be interesting.
So there's some obviously some LSU people in here, which is great. But there was a response to one of them. He goes, the guy's name was Ross. He goes, get used to hearing this. Winning is hard.
Yep.
I think that's just a great response.
That's a Brian Kelly.
It's a Brian Kelly quote. Winning is hard. So yeah, get used to hearing that down there at the Bayou. Kevin Carter, thanks, Kevin. He says maybe the reason he isn't planning for an interim coach is because he already knows who he wants. Hope you're right. I mean, it's definitely a possibility, Kevin. It's absolutely a possibility, and I hope you're right. Now, I will say that.
Yeah, Yeah, I don't think it's a guarantee that that's the case. I think it's more about just he wants to. There's no reason to name an interim coach right away. The coaches are on the road recruiting. The players are going to be off this week anyway. They weren't going to be working out. They were. It was an off week anyway. What exactly do you need an interim coach for this week?
Right.
Now you need to talk to the coaches about, hey, look, make sure you're talking to your position players. Make sure that that they know the steps to don't leave yet and all. But that's more of what Jack Swarbrick needs to do than anything else. So yeah, that's where I'm at on that one.
Spark's got a super chat. Thanks, Spark. Brian, change your background picture to Marcus Freeman. Just saying. He wants you all in, baby.
You will not see me doing that. You will not see me doing that. I mean, I want Marcus Freeman to be the head coach simply because I think he would do a great job.
Right.
It's not personal. It's not because I like Marcus. It's not because I get along with Marcus. I've had, you can count the number of conversations I've had with Marcus Freeman on one hand. Right. It's not like, oh man, I'm tight with Marcus, and if he gets the head coaching job, I'm going to have all this scoop and sourcing. That's not true. That's not it. I just think he would be the best guy for the job. And as I've always promised to do, and I've always done, whether I'm right or wrong, I'm going to give you my honest opinion. There's no agenda.
Yep.
The agenda, other than the agenda being, I think this would allow Notre Dame to take the next step. That's my agenda. Right.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
Because if it was about promoting a guy that I was going to have a connection with, I'd be like, hey, bring back Chip Long, or promote this other assistant coach who I talk to a lot, or whatever, bring back Mike Elko, or you know what I mean? Like, I'd be doing that.
Right.
I don't really know Marcus that well. Like I said, I've had one face-to-face conversation with him lasted 5 minutes, and all my other conversations have been quick. Hey, a quick question for you about something real fast.
Or the interview that you had.
Yeah,
which
that's it.
Is an interview.
Right, which it wasn't he and I.
Right. It's an interview.
It was an interview. Right. It wasn't us hanging out for a couple hours at my place. Right. Sipping Mountain
I've interviewed a lot of famous
steaks.
people. I don't consider them friends. And
yes.
And I guarantee you 1,000% they don't consider me a friend.
Right. If they even know who I am or you are. I mean, that's
exactly.
So that's the thing is, like, look, it's just, I'm always going to try to keep a little bit of try to be professional and objective.
Sure.
And so when I push for a coach specifically, it's because I think that coach would do a great job.
Right.
Like the reason I'm saying, hey, I think Tommy Rees should stay as the OC. I don't really have a personal relationship with Tommy Rees. If anything, I doubt if you ask Tommy Rees about Brian Driscoll, I don't think he would probably have real positive things to say, to be honest with you, because I'm a known critic of the program.
I disagree.
It's just it's because I think he's done a good job this year, and I think he's only going to get better.
Yeah. I think that's my thing with him. I think he's only going to get better if given the opportunity.
Right.
So, okay. Next up, Chris Irish Young. Thanks, Chris. Back-to-back live chats. Work can wait. Brian, I have a contact at Webster's. Let me try to get this traits thing stricken from the dictionary.
Yes.
Thanks for all your hard work.
I mean, we are in an era where words get changed or eliminated or whatever else.
That is true.
Right? I mean, Webster's
cancel culture, baby. Just
changing names of stuff. So I think traits, I've been anti-cancel culture for a long time, but I think the word traits is something we can all agree on needs to go.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go ahead and agree with you on that one. Okay, here we go from AJ. Thanks, AJ. He says, if Freeman were to be hired and have success, wouldn't he be a concern about leaving for Ohio State someday as well?
I don't think so. It's just different. I think Luke Fickell bleeds scarlet and gray. I think Marcus Freeman loves and appreciates and respects his alma mater. I don't think he bleeds scarlet and gray. I think that Marcus Freeman is a guy that is I think that if you would have asked him a year ago about this, I think he would have probably said, maybe that would have been a more legitimate concern. But I think being at Notre Dame, I think it just clicks.
Yeah. I think it's a good fit. It's a good marriage. It's a good, you know what I mean?
It's like, okay, you date pretty girls throughout your life, right? And they're all pretty. But there's just that one that, like, when you meet her, you're like, yeah, no, she's not really better looking than the other ones. They're all pretty, but man, there's just something about her that just strikes me and I connect with, and I just, you know what I mean? And then that ends up, becoming your wife or whatever, right? It's the same thing with the job, same thing with college. Like, a lot of places are great. They all have a lot of attributes, but there's just that one place that just, man, there's just something about this place. For Luke Fickell, that place is Ohio State, the Ohio State University. THE is the, not the. Okay. And I know in a state where, they get excited about being able to spell a 4-letter state, they like to shout it across places. And they only get half of it, and then somebody else has to do the other half. Okay. That the and the might be hard for them, but it's the Ohio State University, not the. But for Luke Fickell, that's what it is. For Marcus Freeman, I don't think it's necessarily that same connection, which is why I think he wants to be at Notre Dame.
Matt Baisley, thanks Matt for the super chat. Definition of buyer's remorse. Freeman wins national championship this year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Kale Pomeroy, thanks Kale, says, is the 3 or 4 spot a realistic hope for the college football playoff? Here we go.
I think so. I mean, look, I mean, we're going to do a show on that tonight.
We will.
So we're still hoping that happens, but yes, I think so. Now again, but it's no different than before. They're going to need help.
Yes.
They're going to need help. They're not going to be able to just get in because of their current resume and other teams' current resume. They're going to need help.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're going to need help. They're going to need some teams, and we'll talk about that on Tuesday. We're going to do a show on that later in the week. That part of our plan has not changed. That has not changed.
Tonight's show. That's what you're talking about. Okay. Jason Warnock. Thanks, Jason. He says, this is a blessing for Notre Dame. Freeman was the highest ceiling, and the bonus of him being a minority. Hire Freeman, and we will be thanking BK for leaving.
I don't really care about that last part. To be honest with you, I don't care if he's white or black or green or whatever else. You hire the right coach.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm not saying that Jason, like, I get where he's saying it's a public relations bonus, but I don't care. And I don't think Notre Dame's ever going to get the credit for that anyway, even if that was motivation for it. You hire the best coach. And Marcus Freeman's not the best candidate for the job because he's black. He's the best candidate for the job because of his talent and his mindset. And again, I'm not saying Jason's not saying that. It's just not something I care about, which is why you've never heard us bring it up. It's never like, you know what, this was a little extra bonus. All the, it's a white campus. You hire a black coach. I don't care about all that.
How'd that work out last time? I mean, and that was a huge headline.
You got the chops. You got the chops, right? And Marcus Freeman has the chops. As simple as that.
Matt Moran, thanks for the super chat. Pat Fitzgerald would leave Northwestern for Notre Dame and only Notre Dame. Does he really get people excited, though? Is he the guy to take you over the top?
Number one, that surprises me because I have heard that Pat Fitzgerald hates Notre Dame.
I've heard that as well, actually, now that you mention it.
So that would surprise me. Like, I could see that as like he's going to take the job only so he can run Notre Dame into the ground and go back to Northwestern. Like, I've heard he hates Notre Dame. So that would surprise me a little bit. But that would be an awful, depressing, sad.
I would not be happy with that at all.
Sad hire.
What about anything that he's done at Northwestern makes you think that he can take Notre Dame from where they are right now to the next level? That's my question. And I don't think anybody has an answer to that because it doesn't exist.
Right.
Robert with the super chat. Brian, thank you, Robert. Brian always demanded his traits from his players. What he did to his players was wrong. Not surprised, but definitely hypocritical. It goes back to the conversation we're having.
Yeah, I get it. I just personally don't feel that way, but I definitely can understand why people would feel that way. Like, I don't agree, but I'm also not going to sit there and argue with you on it because I definitely understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I think the only way to be hypocritical is if, All
right. Hulk Strongest. Thanks, Hulk. He says, I was watching the Inside the Garage podcast, and Cam Hart was saying that he had players from other schools ask him to go play with them, is what he meant to say there, because I heard the same thing. And, of course, they did. College, do you guys understand what college football is right now? He could leave right now and go play for somebody else, in August. So, of course, people are going to try to get him to go play. He's playing really good football right now. I am in no way surprised by that comment at all, in any way. Man, he shot him down right away, as well, and all of them did, because they are here for Notre Dame, not for Brian Kelly. And they all wished him luck. And they all said that they're Notre Dame guys, and it is what it is.
I actually listened to that, and that was the level of maturity and the responses from those kids was impressive.
Yeah,
because there was one point in time where they were getting ready to you could feel like the energy starting to start to turn, and they quickly brought it back. Like, you know what, he's got to do what he's got to do, and we love Coach Freeman, but we also love Coach Reese. Like you could see them, like that was where it's like, and it was like, well, no, hold on, we
got to bring it back to the center
because they're smart kids. They're smart kids.
Exactly. Because they were going all in on Freeman, and then they kind of brought it back and like, well, Coach Reese is a really good coach too, and all of the Yep, absolutely. Here we go. Breakthrough Sports Performance. Thank you very much for the super chat. Odds if Freeman is hired that he can go out and get Jeff Brom as the OC. 0. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, Jeff Brom's the head coach of Purdue. They just went 8-4.
He's not taking an offensive coordinator job at Notre Dame
anywhere.
A head coach.
Jeff Brom's not taking an offensive coordinator job anywhere.
Yes.
Just not going to happen. So
no question.
Yeah.
Dustin Pleasant, thanks for the super chat. Dustin, Arkansas fan here. Welcome to one of the Hogs. Congratulations. That's awesome. Thanks for joining us, man. It sounds to me like Marcus Freeman could be the Sam Pittman of Notre Dame football. Seems like a no-brainer. Culture fit matters.
That's another. We were talking about coaches last night that have had success without being head coaches, and Sam Pittman's an interesting take on that because you saw what Arkansas did. And you say, look, they went 3-7 in his first year, 8-4 in his second. But like, do you know what kind of dumpster fire that Sam Pittman inherited?
Exactly.
Like it was bad. I mean, Chad Morris just did he recruited well. Chad did, but he just was a bad head coach. I mean, really bad head coach. They went 2-10. Here was Chad Morris's record in his 2 years there. They went 2-10 and 2-10. And then 2 years later, Sam Pittman has them at 8-4. And if you look at their record this year, that 8-4 is impressive because they beat Texas. They beat Texas A&M on a neutral field. They beat Mississippi State ranked. They won at LSU. Their losses were a touchdown at Alabama. They lost by a point at Ole Miss, and the play where Ole Miss Arkansas didn't. Arkansas went for 2 and didn't get it. Correct.
Sounds right. Yeah.
Because it made sense. And then they lost to Georgia at Georgia. The only bad loss they had was to Auburn. That was a bad loss. But you're going to have those. I mean, they had some really good wins this year. So their 8-4 is pretty impressive when you consider the context of how they won. That to me is more a more impressive part of what I saw.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Chief Brody says it's just so bizarre how close BK was to being an ND legend. He's had the best spell in Notre Dame history without a title. I think his legacy has to suffer. And I think it does too because of the not necessarily the manner in which he left, although I think that's important. The fact that he left with Notre Dame sitting on the doorstep of a potential run to the national championship.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the timing is terrible. And I realize he had to take the LSU job if that's what he wanted now. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that he did it now, his legacy at Notre Dame is tarnished.
Yeah.
To me. It is. It just is.
Yeah. Vince, here's the deal. Brian Kelly, and I said it before, Brian Kelly was convinced that Notre Dame was holding him back.
Correct.
And there's no other way you can take it, and in my opinion. With Jack Swarbrick's comments today, where Brian Kelly knew during the season that he was going to leave, basically. And that's what I got from Jack Swarbrick's comments. And we heard that last night from Sean, right before Jack Swarbrick's press conference today.
Yep, exactly.
The fact that he didn't like this season, the fact that he just looked at this as a rebuild, like clown stuff right there. The fact that he just, like, as they're going on this great run and making a push for the playoffs, he wants out.
Yeah,
because you don't think you compete for. Hey, how about if you'd have done what you did the last 6 games at the beginning of the year, like we freaking told you to, right? It just tells me that's not a coach who's invested,
right?
And yet you still won 11-1 and are clearly one of the 4 best teams in the country. Hey, Notre Dame wasn't holding you back, partner. You were holding Notre Dame back. Yes, you did a great job getting Notre Dame here, but your unwillingness to look in the mirror and admit you made a mistake and make the tough decisions is exactly why he did not take Notre Dame over that final hump. Did he do a great job getting in there? Absolutely. But the fact of the matter is he didn't do a good job getting to that final point. And let's not also forget it was Jack Swarbrick that made the key hires to get Notre Dame around in 2016. He's the one that drove the Mike Elko hire. He's the one that drove the Chip Long hire, not Brian Kelly. Now, Brian Kelly didn't screw it up the last couple of years, and he made his own good hires going after Marcus Freeman this past offseason. I give Brian Kelly all the credit in the world for that. But the fact is he also was the person holding them back. And then you want to project that onto Notre Dame. It's exactly why he never won a championship in Notre Dame and why he never was going to win a championship in Notre Dame. I always said Brian Kelly's capable of winning a championship in Notre Dame if he's willing to look in the mirror and realize that He's the one that's got to make the changes. The fact that he left instead of being able to do that says a lot about Brian Kelly and why he never won the ultimate championship at Notre Dame, because Brian Kelly was always about Brian Kelly. And people like that are the most unwilling to look in the mirror and say, I screwed up. And that's why the players respect Marcus Freeman more than Brian Kelly, because when Marcus Freeman screwed up, he owned it in front of the whole team. He didn't have to be challenged by the players.
Huge.
It was in front of the whole defense.
Yep.
And he owned it. Brian Kelly will never do that. And whenever Brian Kelly did say, we didn't do a good enough job coaching you, it was always done in a manner that was like, it's you say it because you have to say it, but then the next 10 comments are clearly it wasn't my fault. So whatever.
Yeah. All right. We got a few
I
more.
I think it hurts his legacy big time is the point.
No question. TJ Fallon, thanks TJ, says, please tell me if Pat Fitzgerald
I have not heard from a single source that Pat Fitzgerald has been considered.
Right. That was brought up by somebody with a super chat.
Nor have I been told by any source that I have about Pat Narduzzi, which was one last night. Like, no, I've heard 3 names. It's primarily Fickell and Freeman, and then also Matt Campbell. That is it from what I've heard in the last 24 hours. That is it. And again, Freeman is the guy that I have most of my sources. I'd say probably now like last night, it was more some Luke Fickell talk. Yeah. Mostly today, my sources have been like, it's Freeman. Not all, but most.
You're getting me too. Okay, here we go.
That's just what my sources are telling me.
I know. You get me all too excited. All right, Tommy Guns. Thanks, Tommy, man. He goes, epic games are about to be played. Riley's offense versus Freeman's defense.
Love it.
Look, man, sign me up. Sign me up. Front row Joe for that. I think that is going to be epic for the next few years. However long it goes to be.
I'm sorry, Vince. Yeah, go ahead.
I was done.
I just got fired up.
Yeah.
The key for me is who makes a better coordinator hire on the other side of the ball.
Yes.
It's going to be the key in that rivalry.
Well,
does Marcus Freeman make a better offensive coordinator hire than Lincoln Riley makes as a defensive coordinator hire?
Lincoln Riley's
already made his.
He's already made his, yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So that's going to be the key for me. If Marcus can go out there, if he gets the Notre Dame job, and if he goes out there and hires somebody to be build a dynamic offense, then Notre Dame will continue to pound us. Because remember, USC's got to catch Notre Dame, not the other way around.
Right. Exactly. I got to put, it's not a super chat, but I'm putting it up anyway. Martin Demo says, Fickell looks like the French Formula One driver from Talladega Nights with Will Ferrell. If that's the case, we need Ricky Bobby. That was just great. I had to put that up. That was great.
My gosh.
That was fantastic. Here we go. John A1 with the super chat. If Freeman gets the job, does that change things with Nwankpa and Lucas?
I don't think so.
Because those guys were defensive guys already. I would be surprised, to be honest with you. I mean,
I'm sorry. I just can't even get past the fact some dude said Luke Fickell's Jean Girard.
I'm just saying. And we might have to do a side-by-side at some point, but and then Jay, I will pull this one up, even though it's not a super chat as well, for some wishful thinking. Jay says Hamilton has said that he will stay for his final year if Freeman is hired. I highly doubt it. And you know who would be the first one to tell Kyle Hamilton to go to the NFL?
Freeman.
Marcus Freeman. That's exactly right.
And Kyle may think that, but then his dad and Coach Freeman and everyone else with a brain is gonna be like, "Whoa, appreciate the sentiment, young buck, but you need to go."
Yeah, 100%.
Now, would I be against that as a Notre Dame amp? No.
Of course not.
Would I be against that as someone who is trying to do right by Kyle Hamilton? Yes,
right.
I would.
Exactly.
If I was someone at Notre Dame and thinking about what next year's team could be with Kyle Hamilton, okay.
Yeah, exactly. But anybody with a conscience, you got to be like, man, look, obviously it's your decision, but you got to go. I mean, it just, yeah.
I love this next chat.
The Fonz's third leg. Thanks for the super chat. It says LSU fans crowing that they took our coach for $95 million. I say he took them for $95 million. Oh, that's fantastic. That is awesome. Well played. Well played. Michael
literally left me speechless.
Yeah, I get that's awesome. Michael has a super chat. I've seen a lot of Marcus Freeman is the next Bob Davie. Can we please stop with that? Well, that was like people calling him Marcus Van Gorder 2 months ago. Like, it's just anybody.
That's why you need to stay off Twitter.
Right. Anybody with fingers can have a Twitter account. So, and without, I suppose. But anyway, unfortunately, there's no IQ test to get a Twitter account.
Now, there is some legitimate concern about his lack of experience. I understand that. I understand, especially older Notre Dame fans, like people our age, Vince, that actually lived through the Bob Davie, Charlie Weiss thing. Let me ask you this. Here's my question I always ask. Do you think Bob Davie, anyone that feels that way, it's an honest question. This is not is not a setup. This is not me not taking a shot. This is not me disrespecting you, because I can understand that concern. Do any of you think that if Bob Davie would have been a head coach somewhere else for 5 years, let's say TCU, or if Charlie Weiss would have been the head coach at Cincinnati for 5 years,
or Kansas even, because that would be a stepping stone to Notre Dame.
Do any of you think that experience would have then brought them to Notre Dame and allowed them to be successful at Notre Dame?
Right.
Like that's all I can say. They failed because they weren't good head coaches. And I don't think any experience previously would change that at all.
Right.
Right? I mean, Look, that's why guys who have success go places and fail. Guys with no success go places and have success. It's more about the quality of the coach and finding the right fit than it is about your experiences. I've always said, if you got the chops, you got the chops. Now, it's up to Marcus Freeman to be smart and savvy enough to make sure that, hey, you got to know your own limitations as a coach. And I have never been a head coach before. Notre Dame is a big job. So what do I got to do from a staff standpoint to make sure that I am making sure that all the duties get handled and that I have people in place to help me? Like Tommy Rees did that with John McNulty. So I was told that Tommy Rees was the driving factor behind John McNulty coming to Notre Dame because they worked together with the Chargers. Why would he want John McNulty? Who's ever heard of John McNulty? Because John McNulty's coaching the National Football League, and John McNulty's a experienced offensive coordinator,
right,
and someone that Tommy trusts, and he could kind of help Tommy with learning some of the ropes of what it means to be an offensive coordinator for the first time. That's why. And that's a smart, savvy move. Marcus Freeman pushing to have an expanded recruiting staff and things like that is because he knows he can't do it all by himself. And especially as a coordinator, he's going to need some help with that. So that's why you go get a Chad Bowden. Right. So I think he'll be smart enough to know that. But that's going to be the thing is I'd rather him or even Jack Swarbrick dictate that than for them to not hire him. Because again, as I said in my article, you do not want to be the AD or board of trustee member in 5 years that passed on Marcus Freeman.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. The risk reward, like the risk of not hiring him, I feel is higher than the risk of hiring him. Like that right. I'm firmly, there was a super chat way at the beginning of the show that asked something along those lines. And that is, I am firmly in that category. No question.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Ryan Michael with a super chat just entered the chat. Is Diggs as good as gone? What do you think is the best chance of keeping him, and how likely is that?
I don't know if he's responding to something I put on the Irish Breakdown message board. But I don't know if there's something out there about that. I would rather keep that for now on the message board.
Okay, you're gonna make me go over there. Fine, I will.
So, I think it's a little too early with a lot of these guys.
Will Claw with the super chat. Thanks, Will. He says, "Are you guys worried that the board does not want Marcus Freeman as the head coach?"
I don't think so. I think there's a lot of I think there's actually a lot of people that are there are a lot of people at Notre Dame that like the idea of him doing that, of him being the next head coach, in my opinion.
Spark, in the same vein, he says, was wondering, do you think the boosters and alumni have any influence on who Jack would hire as the new head coach?
No. Devin Moore just decommitted from Notre Dame, by the way.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. So that, I don't think Notre Dame is going to be out in this instance, but yeah. They're going to have to, this is again why Jack's going to have to move quickly.
Right.
In my opinion.
Let's see here. Jim with the super chat. Why did Elko leave? I know you can speak to that.
Well, he got a huge pay raise.
Right.
There were some factors, I'm told, with his kids of living up north was with some health issues with his children that living up north in the winters and stuff and different things had a little bit of a factor. I don't know how true that is. It's something I was told. And I don't think he necessarily loved working with Brian Kelly. But I think the bigger factors are that he got a lot of money and wanted to go to a place where he, was with a coach who was going to work hard. So
John Rich, thanks, John. He says, every business school grad is aware of the, quote, Peter principle, and it applies to BK. He reached the level of his incompetence. There you go. I went to physical education school, so
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Sorry. No, actually, I went to history school.
He just reached the level that he could take it to.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah. That he felt he could take them to. How's that sound? PK for ND. Thank you, PK. Says, yes, Brian, BK and his double speak equals emergency brake on the ND Lamborghini.
Yeah. I'm just glad I don't have to be a part of any more Brian Kelly press conferences.
No, that's fair. Jim with another one. Thanks, Jim. He says, if Tommy Rees remains as the OC with Marcus Freeman as the head coach, how does the offense change? Does the D change very much?
The D won't change. It'll still be his philosophy and what he believes in. There's no doubt about that. For me, it comes down to simply look. A lot of times when you have defensive coordinators that get hired as head coaches, they kind of look at what did I struggle with? What are the things that give me most of the problems? When I sit at clinics and stuff like that with other defensive coordinators, what are the things that we talk about as we have the hardest time to stop? And you try to find someone that'll do that. And that's ultimately what you do. As far as Tommy Rees as the OC, how will the offense change? I mean, I think it's still going to be a pro-style offense. I hope it's a little bit more tempo and big play oriented is what I hope that it becomes. And look a lot like what we've seen the last 6 weeks with some even more adjustments. There are still things this offense is missing, either from a schematic, philosophical, or emphasis standpoint. There are still some things missing, but you can't fix it all in one day. When you went into the season running one type of offense and then you switch midstream, and you've got an extra week to do it. You can't just completely change things around. So hopefully that'll be what we see.
And then Jay with the super chat about Devin Moore,
right?
Decommitting, bummer. Agreed. No, it is a bummer. And whoever is named the head coach, look, regardless, Notre Dame, whoever it is going to have their work cut out for them from the recruiting. That's what happens when there's a coaching change. Okay. Mm-hmm. I mean, people need to understand that it's not going to be all roses. I mean, there's going to be some changes. Now, I would venture to say that, Notre Dame could be in a better off position if they make the right choice, but that remains to be seen. That remains to be seen. Rob Lobo, 123 with the super chat says Notre Dame players have moved on quickly from Kelly because I believe they were also starting to realize that Kelly didn't believe in them winning the ship.
I don't think it's that. I don't think the players ever truly believed and Vince, you and I kind of had a little bit of a disagreement about this a couple weeks ago. You had made the comment that the players believe Brian Kelly has their back. And I said on the field, yes. Off the field, no. I don't think that they believe that. That's what I've been told for 10 years. And it hasn't changed in post-2016. It's simply they know that Brian Kelly's their coach, and Brian Kelly is going to have their back as long as they bring value to University of Notre Dame. I mean,
exactly.
Who was it? Was it Mike? Who was it? Somebody was it was in the stream last night with the Nick Asif thing. There was one of the Notre Dame players was like, they were asking him about Brian Kelly. He's like, well, I didn't really have much of a relationship with Brian Kelly. I've been told that so many times. I mean, and I'm not talking about like guys that were nobodies. I'm talking about captains, starters, stuff like that. Like there's some players he was really tight with, and others, I mean, they're just like, I don't really have much of a relationship with Brian Kelly, and so I don't think I don't think they dislike Brian Kelly. We've always talked about this. They just don't have that. I'm going to run through a wall for Brian Kelly like the Clemson kids have for Dabo, or the level of I'm going to trust my coach that because I know what he's telling me is going to be the thing that gets me to be successful, like the Alabama players have for Nick Saban. Neither of those things exist, in my opinion. And so that's why I feel like the players are so on board with Marcus Freeman, because there's an actual thought that this guy really cares about me. You hear some things they say, just like little things of, I mean, this guy doesn't even coach me, but he'll just stop me in the hallway, ask me how I'm doing, make sure I'm doing all right. And it's just like, kids love that stuff, man. They love that stuff. It's as opposed to a coach who's just kind of like off in his little corner ivory tower, or just not around because he's doing some speaking engagement, or he's doing this or he's doing that. So
right.
That's kind of my thoughts.
I want to throw this up here because it's just one of those ridiculous, in my opinion, thoughts for who should be the next head coach. There's been some Tom Coughlin, people out there because he beat Tom Brady twice. He's also hasn't been a college coach since I was 11 years old. Okay. I mean, he's 75 years old. He's not going to come to Notre Dame and be the head coach. And they're not, it's just, okay. That's along, in my opinion, that's along the same vein as, Brady Quinn for head coach. Okay. It's not going to happen. All right. Couple more super chats here. Rouse Productions. How likely that Freeman has a guarantee in place to be head coach, just not this soon, but will still honor spending today helping Freeman lock in DC OC?
There was no guarantee that he would be the head coach of Notre Dame. None. Which is why I wrote the article last week that they needed to make that happen.
Right.
Right? Because there wasn't one. That was not part of the arrangement. Now, do I think that he thought that there was an opportunity for that? Yes. But not in the direct, hey, Marcus, come here and you'll be the next head coach type of manner.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike with a super chat. Dr. Jack taking too long, in my opinion. We have.
I get it.
Yeah, I totally get it. Jimbo, thanks, Jimbo, with the super chat. Freeman or bust, pay Tommy Rees and Lance Taylor whatever they want. And believe it or not, we are all caught up.
So, Vince, what I want to wrap up with is kind of we've kind of already done this. I feel like we've already done it. So I just, we've talked so much about Marcus Freeman. Look, I think that's the move for Notre Dame at this point in time. I think that's the move. Look, Luke Fickell's a good football coach. And Luke Fickell would do a good job at Notre Dame. I think he would continue what Brian Kelly has built. I don't think he takes you over that next hump, in my opinion, in any way possible. I think that there are legitimate concerns about Marcus Freeman because he has not been a head coach. I am not someone who's saying it doesn't matter that he's never been a head coach. It matters. But where do you place it on the scale of importance? And to me, if a guy's never been a head coach, there need to be certain traits, attributes, and characteristics and things that he has displayed that outweigh that. And in my opinion, Bob Davie did not have those things. Charlie Weis did not have those things that we knew of. Now, I was more certain that Bob Davie didn't have it than Charlie Weis because I didn't watch a ton of NFL football. And all I knew about Charlie Weis is that he'd won 4 Super Bowls in the NFL, right? And Charlie was a great recruiter, and Charlie had some traits, right? Some attributes that worked at Notre Dame. He just didn't have some important ones that I don't. Charlie Weis didn't believe in fundamentals. He didn't believe in technique. He didn't believe in teaching players how to play. He thought it was a scheme. You can't be that way in college. That's partly why he failed. Charlie Weis was bad at hiring coaches. That's partly why he failed at Notre Dame. Charlie Weis didn't treat people well. That's another reason he failed at Notre Dame. Those aren't issues for Brian Kelly. I mean, for Marcus Freeman, they're not. The issues with Bob Davie. Bob Davie was too conservative. Bob Davie was not someone who was a tremendously intellectual football coach. He was about fundamentals and toughness, but he was not he didn't have a dynamic personality. He wasn't a dynamic recruiter. He wasn't someone that, to me, put great defenses on the field. His defenses at Notre Dame were okay. His defenses at Texas A&M were pretty good because of R.C. Slocum.
Yeah,
more so than him.
Exactly.
And so there's nothing in common here. Does Marcus Freeman have the chops or not? And I believe he has the chops. I believe his players believe he has the chops, and I think the recruits believe he has the chops. The vast majority of them. And so at this point in time, it's not necessarily easy, but it's the move you got to make, in my opinion. And and I believe that he has to do it sooner rather than later, and make that move. And there was a couple things, Vince, that I wanted to discuss from the press conference that I didn't get to actually.
Real quick, just so
Yep.
I stay up to date with the super chats. We got one here. Big Dustin, thanks, man. He says, will Jack Cohn stay the starter being a Kelly guy? Yeah.
Jack Cohn isn't a Kelly guy. Jack Cohn is Notre Dame's best quarterback in 2021.
That's correct. And he will absolutely be the quarterback. So
yeah.
Yep.
So
just wanted to adjust that.
Yes. The thing where he said that Brian Kelly did not give Marcus Freeman or give Notre Dame a chance to counter, and the fact that Jack Swarbrick said that that he was not surprised that Brian Kelly left, to me was the biggest takeaway from today's press conference. And we kind of mentioned it, but I really wanted to get your thoughts on that, because to me, that's where Jack's saltiness, I thought, kind of came through. Jack seemed really in his way, seemed kind of pissed off about that. Like, he gave Kelly his credit, but then the rest of it, it's the players. It's, again, I don't think he was throwing shade at Kelly there, but I think he was purposely emphasizing it. It's, we've got a great thing here. Like, he was taking some shots at Kelly. He's talking about, we're going to win a championship. We're willing to do whatever it takes to win a championship. Like, he had a direct quote in there that I think was a direct response to Brian Kelly about, and I'm going to have to find it here, but it was a direct, to me, it was definitely a shot at Brian Kelly. When he talked about, he mentioned in his opening statement, he mentioned championship twice in the first couple parts of it. He says, we have never been in a better position to take the next step in building this program into a consistent contender for national championships. And I'm excited with the opportunity to track the next leader to do that. There was another part where he said that I'm going to try to find. He said it kind of in response to kind of a thing that Brian Kelly had apparently said, but he basically was like, Brian never talked to me about these other jobs, and any conversations we had were about doing whatever it takes for us to win a championship here.
And he was I was surprised that he was so quick to confirm the fact that they had no conversation about him talking to other schools.
Right. Here's the comment, because what we're hearing a lot of is from people that are saying, Kelly is telling people that he felt that I had been told by a good source today that Kelly was telling people that the administration wasn't willing to meet certain demands and different things like that.
Right.
And Jack Swarbrick said this. He said about, did Kelly meet with him? He said he did not. This is a direct quote from Jack Swarbrick. Yes, he did not discuss with me the conversations he had with other universities. We always are talking about the program's need and how to improve it. And there was not anything identified at any time that was something we could not accommodate or meet. We just didn't have those things come up.
So he's basically saying Kelly just wanted to leave.
I think it was that Kelly could leave, but anything about Kelly leaving because we were holding him back is BS.
That's right. Right. Exactly. He just wanted to leave. Period. Right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. He wanted to leave. Right. And there was no coming back for a match. There was no nothing. He wanted to leave. Right. And then he went on to say, in conversations that he had with Brian Kelly throughout the year, there were some Freudian slips here and there. So it was obvious that he didn't want to be there anymore. Right. And you know what? And when that's the case, see ya.
Peace out.
Like, that's cool, man.
Brian Kelly hasn't wanted to be here for a long time. I just think now Brian Kelly realizes all these jobs started, because that's the other thing, is there was a bunch of jobs that just kind of opened up during the year. So he's probably thinking, like, I'm going to have some opportunities, you know what I mean, to get out of here. So I just kind of felt like it just kind of confirmed everything that I've ever felt about Brian Kelly. He did not have a passion for Notre Dame. He had a passion for Brian Kelly and his legacy. People say, I don't think BK wanted to leave. He was for sale, folks. That's exactly a guy that wants to leave. Right. If you're for sale,
then you want to
leave.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So, I mean, there have been so many times that Brian Kelly would have left Notre Dame. I've said this before. This isn't new. I'm not saying this now just because he's gone. We've said this before. That there have been times in the past where if someone would have taken him, he would have left Notre Dame. If an NFL team would have offered him a head coaching job in 2012, he would have taken it.
Right.
I have not had a single trusted source that has told me otherwise. In 2016, he wanted to leave. He did.
Right.
It's just teams wouldn't take him. LSU was one of the jobs his agent tried to get him for. So, and they obviously they weren't going to take a house 4-8. They were trying to hire Tom Herman and ended up going with Ed Orgeron. So to me, this is not a shock that Brian Kelly left. Of course he wanted to leave. And, it confirmed everything. And you could, and I think the other thing too is Jack Swarbrick has been Brian Kelly's biggest defender and biggest supporter. And I feel like he kind of felt, it struck me, and I don't know if anybody else thought that. It struck me that he seemed a little ticked that there's stuff coming out that, they didn't meet his demands. I mean, the things this university has done to provide Brian Kelly with the best facilities around is incredible.
Right.
And for Brian Kelly to then leave and try to tell people behind the scenes that Notre Dame wasn't meeting the needs that's the cowardice of Brian Kelly showing. Not that he left. I don't care if he left, because look, sometimes, you just get to a point where like, man, I just need a new challenge. I've been here for 12 years. I'm not excited about getting up and going to work every day. So you do one of two things. You do what Bob Stoops did and retire, or you find a new place to coach. I got no problem with that. No problem with that. But tell people that. Don't sit there and say to different people behind the scenes, well, they weren't meeting this and they weren't doing that and all those kind of things, man. Just, I don't even want to hear it.
Yep.
I don't even want to hear it.
We do have another super chat I'll throw in here. Michael, I believe that's a multiple super chat from Michael, so thank you. Want to know what kind of guy Brian Kelly is or was. Has anyone heard the story about him at Central Michigan? Matt LaFleur and Robert Saleh do.
I don't know anything about that.
I don't know what that story is. I apologize, Michael. John Miller's got a super chat. He says, is it possible that Swarbrick, he was a key guide in getting Freeman, set up a flush of Brian Kelly? Win by 2024. I have your replacement on the payroll. I mean, I would love if that conversation took place, but I doubt that it did. I mean, I don't know, though. I mean, that would be speculation on any of our parts if that conversation actually took place. There's two people on the planet that would know if it did.
Right.
And one's in Louisiana. So
I highly, highly, highly doubt that Brian Kelly and Jack Swarbrick had that conversation.
Right.
That just doesn't seem like that Jack Swarbrick's kind of thing.
Michael says to Google it. The story about Central Michigan. So I'll get to
Michael,
that.
just shoot me a DM or something like that.
There you go.
Too much going on today to Google something like that.
Yeah. Greg with the big super chat. Thanks, Greg. He says, as we wait and watch Jack do his work, how do you rate Jack Swarbrick as an athletic director for his whole body of work? Isn't replacing him, and that time is coming, really the next big hire?
After the head coach, sure.
Yeah.
But right now, the next big hire is the one he's going to make.
Right. Exactly. And he's getting older. There's no question. He's not going to be here forever. And the athletic director at Notre Dame is a really, really important job, not only at Notre Dame, but across collegiate sports. Right. I mean, and I will say this, Jack Swarbrick has made this job that, because I don't think that
Brian Kelly played a role too, but you were absolutely correct.
But yes, prior to Jack Swarbrick, the athletic director job at Notre Dame was not what it is now. And I think a lot of that goes to Jack Swarbrick and just the way he is just a great power broker. I think he's done an excellent job as the athletic director. I think people will, whoever they replace him with, maybe it's going to be some great human, but I think they're going to miss Jack Swarbrick as the athletic director. That's my opinion.
I agree. So, I'm having somebody just sent me that. Anything else from the press conference today, Vince, that struck you?
We've talked about everything that really struck me, to be honest with you. It was the whole not going to name an interim. I think that was telling to a degree. I think that somebody in the chat earlier, as I was scrolling through looking for super chats, said something along the lines of when Charlie Weiss was fired, Jack Swarbrick made a point to say somebody with head coaching experience is a must. And he was point blank asked that question today, and he said no. So I think that is telling as well.
Did he say no, or did he say it's not? He word
saladed it. Yeah. I mean, he could have very easily said yes that's something that we're looking for. But he didn't. I mean, he word saladed it.
Yeah.
But
here's what he said.
Thanks.
I don't want to answer it as a hypothetical. We're going to take those characteristics and we're going to find the best person. I don't want to set any individual criteria as part of that. So yeah, he basically said no without saying no.
Yeah, exactly. It's a word salad. I mean, and he was very I remember him saying this when he got rid of Weiss. He's like, we're looking for somebody with head coaching
which at that time you needed. And here's the difference between the two jobs. You had to and he said this day, you had to rebuild.
Yes.
You don't rebuild with a first-time head coach. You keep things going with a first-time head coach. Like that, like we've seen very few, like the Kirby Smart thing at Georgia. They weren't rebuilding at Georgia. Mark Richt had a pretty nice thing going there. It was okay. Yeah. Somebody's got to take this thing to the next level, but he inherited a pretty darn good football team. You know, you look at Ryan Day, inherited a juggernaut. Dabo's the closest thing you can find to someone who had to kind of rebuild, and he almost got fired before he finally got that thing going. But usually in these instances, it's like you get a first-time head coach, someone who you're going to take over a thing that's kind of already rolling. And so I think the situations are certainly different.
Yeah.
So I want to answer Steve Flanagan's question, but here's a little snippet that I was sent about it. So on a winter night, and so Robert Saleh and Matt LaFleur were apparently GAs on Brian. Okay. No, somebody sent it to me. Kelly Garvey sent it to me.
Nice.
He said on a winter night in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, Matt LaFleur and Robert. How do you say it? Saleh? Is that how you say the head coach?
I wasn't sure.
It said. Turns out they weren't on they were invited to a party at the home of their boss, Central Michigan University football coach Brian Kelly. Turns out they weren't on the guest list. They were on the worker list. We shoveled the snow and parked all the cars. Then at the end of the night, we had to go get the cars again. And then we went back to the tiny apartment they shared as graduate assistants and stood around their kitchen table, the one without any chairs. We decided that when we're in that position, we're never going to treat people the way we got treated, said Saleh, now the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator, and Matty's lived up to that. So I don't think that's a huge deal to me. It's just that's honestly, as someone who was a GA, you know, or in sort of a position like that at the time, that's just kind of how GAs were treated. I don't like it. Knowing Brian Kelly doesn't surprise me. I also don't think it's necessarily a horrible thing, but yeah, I mean, that's Brian Kelly. But look, Matt LaFleur also then a decade later took a job coaching with Brian Kelly. Right? I mean,
true.
He clearly wasn't that offended by it, you know, because Brian Kelly was at Central Michigan from 04 to 06. In 2014, Matt LaFleur took a job coaching with Brian Kelly. So, I mean, how upset was he really about that? But no, it doesn't bode well for Brian Kelly, but I also don't think it's a huge deal. So
we do have a super chat that I will throw in before I lose it. Here we go from Matt. He says, just want to say thanks for all the shows, both scheduled and impromptu. Stuck home sick like a dog, and you guys are helping me get through. Matt, I hope you feel better, man, and I'm glad that we could be there with you.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
No doubt about it. Yep. So is there anything else we want to get to,
Brian?
Brian?
There was a question by, let me see here.
About you not wanting to go to press conferences anymore?
Correct. Steve Flanagan, here you go. So why are you glad you don't have to cover a BK press conference anymore? Because, first of all, he just was so constantly dishonest in press conferences. There's one thing I mean, look, and I've voiced my opinions on Brian Kelly press conferences and what he says at press conferences for a long time. This isn't like sour grapes new. I mean, how often do we say, I don't listen to anything Brian Kelly says at a press conference? There is deflecting and there is, you know, you can only say so much. You don't want to give too much away. And then there's just flat out making stuff up. And Brian Kelly just flat made stuff up or just told us what we wanted to hear or assumed we were too stupid to know the difference. It's like, remember the time they played Navy and they struggled and he had some kind of comments about like why Jerron Jones didn't play. And it was like, well, because they do this, and this. And you're like, that doesn't even make any sense. But he just assumed that nobody in the media was smart enough to know how to defend the triple option, that we would all just believe it.
Yeah.
You know, and it just would be stuff like that all the time. It's like, you know, Ethan Johnson's at 90% for like 9 weeks in a row and never played, you know, I mean, just I mean, how many times was Jarrett Grace about ready to play? And it's like, when you're talking about, it's like, there's no way Jarrett Grace is playing right now, And it just was constantly, in my opinion, just saying, just because to me, when you're constantly that dishonest, you have no respect for the people you're talking to. They're just there for your use. I'm going to say what I need to say to get what I need out. And I don't have any respect for the people that do that job. That's how I always felt about it. And like, I just kind of stopped asking him questions after a while. Cause like, I already knew what he was going to say. I mean, literally knew what Brian Kelly was going to say if I asked him a question. So I just said, forget it. I'm not going to ask him these questions and give this stupid soundbite. I'm just going to break down the film and tell people what happened. Right. Because I know he's not going to answer. And then sometimes you'd ask a question and he would take it completely the wrong way on purpose or not on purpose. I don't know. And then you're like, yeah, that's not even remotely close to what I asked. So it's just stuff like that. I feel like you can look, no coaches are just going to come out and say, hey, coach, what's your game plan for this weekend? Well, Drisk, here's our practice script for today. I'm going to invite you into the office to watch some of our practice film so you can report. No coach is going to do that, right? I don't ask you to do that. There's time and a place where you kind of say something that's sort of a half truth and all. I get all that, right? That's part of being a coach. But there's other times you're just like, you're just treating us in a way where there's clearly no respect for what we do. And I'm sorry, I don't care who you are or where you coach at. I work my tail off. You respect what we do. And I don't care what the media says. I don't care what people think and write, but yet you always comment on it. For someone who doesn't care what people in the media say, you sure do read and respond to a lot of what we say. And that pettiness, I'm just not going to miss, to be completely honest with you. I'm not going to miss that. So that's why I don't have to cover Brian Kelly press conference anymore.
We got a super chat from Ryan. He says, jersey number 1. Was that a BK thing because of Bryant? I assume that jersey will be used now that he is gone.
No, that was something they did in the middle of the 2016 season. Remember that? Like they kind of got rid of that. And I don't think it was because I think Greg passed away after that. I could be wrong on that, but I think that happened afterwards. So, yeah.
10-4. Obviously, that's all the super chats that we have, Brian. Is there anything else you wanted to?
No, we're going to have a show tonight after
we'll be right back at it.
Yeah, after the press conference comes out. So it'll be 7:00 is when the show is supposed to come out for the college football playoff. I'm just like, as I'm talking, I'm trying to read Twitter just to see if anything and read my tweets just to see I'm getting any texts. Cause as soon as we shut the show down, something's going to happen.
And look, we're going to do a college football playoff show tonight, but
that's what we're going to do. Yeah.
To talk about, we will talk about
We'll do that too.
Of course we will. This, people.
So we'll start at 7:20 and we'll go for about an hour.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then, that's what we'll do.
Already putting the end time on it.
Yeah. Well, I got a couple things I got to do for some LSU TV stations and stuff tonight, and honestly, I'm pretty tired. So, yeah, yep.
Don't worry, it's only going to get worse, my friend.
Yeah, so I'm not alone. Martin Wharton says, BD, you are absolutely correct. I always thought his press conferences was him doing you and the fans a favor. They should be honored. He says that we were honored by his presence. I think he thought we should be.
Yeah, and I will tell you right now, that is the part that makes me laugh the most about this whole thing, because he has no idea what he's getting himself into when it comes to the media.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because he controlled the narrative with most of the media members, and it's not going to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
So good luck, my friend. Good luck.
All right, everybody, thanks for being with us today. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, sign up for Irish Breakdown. We've had a ton of people sign up the last couple days. We appreciate all of you. Check out irishbreakdown.com. Check out the article I wrote if you haven't written it about why I think Marcus Freeman needs to be the next head coach. And we will see you tonight around 7:20 is when we plan on going live. 7:20ish. We'll set it for 7:20, but if they're still not released the rankings yet, then obviously we'll start a little bit later, but we'll get started around 7:20. And if there's more news to break, then we will be back. So that's why you need to hit the notification bell, because when we set a show and we set a time, you'll get an email immediately, a notification immediately letting you know what's going on. So anyway, have a great rest of your day. Thanks for being with us last night. Thanks for being today. We had our two biggest chat our biggest streams ever.
Absolutely.
The last 2 days, last night, today. So we appreciate y'all. Hope to keep growing this thing, and we'll talk to you all very, very soon.